I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got power, and pain and joy inside my DNA.
Chapter 1. Prologue. Chapter Text. Where did it all go wrong? After rescuing Mikey from falling from the building, who wishes to commit suicide, Hanagaki Takemichi feels the electric current of his palms. Moments later, he finds himself in front of his friends inside a train, to which he concludes this is where he first time traveled back to the past. Realizing the potential opportunity, Takemichi steels himself to try and save everyone properly this time. From the battle on August 3rd, he saves Draken from bleeding to death, which marks his first rescue. From the battle against Mobius, he stops Kazutora from stabbing Baji and stopping Mikey from beating Kazutora, to which the two reconcile again slowly after time. And this time, Kazutora wasn't put in juvie since he did not kill Baji and became part of Tommen. From the Christmas battle against the Black Dragons, like before, Takemichi rescues Hakai from his older brother and wins the fight against the Shiba sibling. Even as to reconciling the Shiba siblings, even if it was taking a long time, they'll heal eventually. From the battle against Tenjiku, it started with Emma, in making sure she doesn't die. He remained by her side the whole time, and when Kisaki and Hanma arrived on a motorcycle to hit Emma with a bat, Takemichi blocks Emma from the hit just barely, only leaving him severely injured but alive, and Emma, unconscious but mildly injured, to which brings Takemichi joy that he has saved her. But he knows the battle isn't over yet. Stubborn and self-sacrificing idiot he is, he leaves the hospital to save Kakucho and Izana from the gunpoint of Kisaki, and just in time, he pushes Izana and Kakucho in time before they got shot, surprising the Tommen members, executives, and commanders as to why Michai was there. They didn't realize Kisaki and Hanma had escaped. Takemichi pursues the two, knowing that Kisaki is well about to die. Even though he had hated him for what he did, he lost his hatred for him in due time, resolving himself to save Kisaki, and alongside him is Draken, where he helps Michai chase after the two after finding out about his time travel ability from Hina, where Michai explained to her everything about it. Takemichi arrives near Kisaki, who was nearing the pedestrian lane where he is supposed to die. In making sure he doesn't, Michai runs towards Kisaki swiftly and pulled him out of the way, and Michai was the one hit by the truck. In a panic, Kisaki hurries over to him and tries to bring him to a nearby hospital, which brought him to the for emergency surgery. And when the Tommen executives, Mikey and Draken, alongside Hina, the Mizo gang, surprisingly, Izana and Kakucho, too, and the 3BD trio, they anxiously wait for his recovery. They didn't bother Kisaki, who remained stiff at the side of the door, pondering as to why he saved him, despite all he did to ruin his life. Whilst covered in Michai's blood, with Hanma beside him, Hina recognizes him, both in the past and the information Takemichi told her. He was about to comfort her when the doctor in charge of the surgery came out, informing them all that Michai survived the surgery and is on the way to recovery. Everyone part with Tommen screamed in joy, slouched in relief. Some had shed tears. Izana and Kakucho held together their hands tightly in relief. The BD trio only smiled and sighed. While Kisaki left, Hina noticed and chases after him, to which he stopped when he called out for him, and when he turned around, he finds himself hugging him. Shocked, he asks why. To which she responds, "I forgive you," in a soft and comforting voice. This broke Kisaki to tears as he hugged her back, muttering thank yous and I'm sorries to her over and over. While Takemichi recovers, Tommen decided to wait for him and brought it upon themselves to reconcile. Izana and Mikey reconcile slightly over time, much to Emma's happiness that her brothers are slowly getting along, and to Kakucho's joy, too, while Kisaki, on the other hand, despite everyone's wishes to murder him then and there, which they couldn't, being Hina being there protecting him, apologized to them for what he did and announced that he will be leaving the gang community for the better. Well, for Hanma, he remained as Kisaki's dog, but he never left the gang community. He's more of a freelance gangster now, if you know what I mean. Someone who neutral to whatever wars between gangs, only join a side when he's inevitably defeated. Leaving the part out that he did it on the behalf of Takemichi. And with that, everything was complete. When Takemichi recovered completely, then did Mikey ask him of the future, to which he told him as well, like the last time, and then and there sealed Mikey's decision. The decision to disband Tommen. It was a shock to the members, but not much to the few, mostly Takemichi. And with Tommen disbanded, the position of the number 1 gang is once again vacant. While the others, now living in normal, fulfilling lives, went their separate ways. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. It was until he heard from Yamagishi, who he takes the same high school life as Michai, about the ongoing gang called the Battle of the Three Deities. This doesn't concern him much since he's no longer a part of it, until the mentioned deity was a gang name he's familiar with. Kanto Manji Gang. The shock would be an understatement for Michai as to why. Why is Tommen back? Or better yet, why is it now Kanto Manji Gang? To his worry, he looks for the others, most especially Draken, the former vice commander of Tokyo Manji Gang, to which he finds him gone from the motor shop he works in alongside Inupi, both males gone. Worry seeping through, he looks for them. He tries for Chifuyu, Baji and Kazutora, who owns a pet shop together, to find them gone too. Then he tries Hakai and Mitsuya, who works together as model and designer, and alas, gone as well. Anyone he knew was gone. It had started to rain, and he didn't bring an umbrella. He was about to start again another day, until he was cornered in a street. 2 gangs coming out of nowhere, claiming that they are scouting for him. He was confused as to why, until a familiar voice voiced out a protest of not involving him in this battle, to which he finds Draken, wearing a black long hooded coat with the name of Brahmin on the sleeves, and not just him, but the others as well, the rest of Tommen being there. Before he could voice out, another voice emerges from the other gang, wearing a red uniform. From what he heard, is the Rokuhara Tandai gang, a man with a bizarre tattoo on his right face down to his neck, claiming they're also scouting for him, to which some members emerged from the shadows, finding familiar people too. Kakucho, Izana, the Heitani siblings, Ran and Rindu, Shin Madaram and Kanji Machizuki, who are wearing the same uniform. Of course, Michai knew Izana and Kakucho haven't left the gang community like Tommen, but to find them being submissive to someone like this South guy. And before Michai could reply again, the man with a scar on his eye, blowing a cigarette, grins and replies a very odd statement, before he calls out a name Senju. And out of nowhere, an umbrella was hurled towards South, to which he deflects quickly, and when he did, a roundhouse kick was landed to him, to which, when the unknown person landed, requested his umbrella back, to which was at Takemichi foot. Obligingly, he hands the umbrella back to the Senju person. Finding this quite overwhelming, the confrontation ends immediately when police sirens were heard. To which, Draken and the rest explained what is going on after they got off the rain and freshened up. That Mikey had started the Kanto Manji gang. And that the gang is a lot different from before. More violent, cruel, and are unfair in a fight by fighting armed. The others decided to join Draken in stopping Mikey by joining Brahmin, leaving Takemichi out for his own safety. When he asked about the Izana and the others, they replied that they were either defeated by South or joined forces with him. Of course, being Takemichi, he joins Brahmin in order to stop Mikey stray further away from them. To which he finds out that the Senju person was not only the gang leader, but he was a she. This surprised him the most, as well as to find, according to Draken and Mitsuya's intel, she has Akashi Takeomi, the god of war, Amashi Wakasa, the white leopard, Kizo Arashi or Benkei, the first black dragon executives are a part of Brahmin. Tu immediately took a liking to Michai, as he resembles the first-gen president of BD in more ways than that, and the fact he's the 11th-gen president of BD. A few days later, Senju invites Takemichi to go on a shopping spree with her, per Takeomi's request, and he obliged. But suddenly, when he was with her, he suddenly saw some glimpses of Senju. She was lying in a pool of blood, and him cradling her head as she slowly bleeds to death. Worry seeps through him as he finds himself being able to see a distant death or future of this girl. And it nearly came true as members from Rokuhara Tandai appeared out of nowhere with a gun, aiming at Michai, which Senju came rushing towards him. He stops her in time, shielding her, expecting a bullet to seep through. Draken was then in view of the two. The members fled at his arrival, and before Takemichi could ask about Draken, he falls to the ground, laying there bleeding. Horrified, Takemichi immediately cradles Draken, Senju calling for an ambulance, and just by luck, he was taken to the hospital. And this dawned on Michai. Draken nearly lost his life again. And this time, it's because he interfered with fate, nearly costing Draken's life, who he isn't sure at all anymore if he'll survive at all with the bullet wounds that had pierced him. And to make things worse, the battle of the three deities occurred on a rainy night. He finds face to face again with Mikey, who seems different than usual. Brahman, Rokuhara, and Kantomanji are all here, where an all-out brawl occurred, and beside Mikey was Sanzu and Kakanoi. The war was brutal, everyone not once letting up on the fight. Michi just stands there, blankly at what just occurred to Draken. Senju and South were about to brawl, until, when Takemichi came face to face with South, slightly touching him, he saw his fate, and this time, he saw Mikey. Mikey, beating South mercilessly and killing him in the process. Horrified, he didn't realize it was about to occur when Mikey approached South himself, and they were brawling like maniacs. What seems to be South's advantage quickly changed to Mikey's favor, and before Mikey could land a fatal blow, Michi steps in, stopping between South and Mikey, to prevent him from killing him, which only directed Mikey's dark impulses towards him, and that nearly costed Michi's life. If only the cops didn't show up sooner, Michi would have died from Mikey's unrelenting punches or by being stopped by Kakanoi himself, declaring quickly that Rokuhara Tandai and Brahman has lost, and that they will either all disband or join Kantomanji gang. To which, some refused to join a blood-drenched gang, some joined for the sake of not causing Mikey his ire, or that they didn't want to be near Mikey's dark impulses at all, and those that did were Izana and Kikucho, the Heitani sibling. For South, he just quickly left, alongside Maderam and Mochizuki. South never felt grateful than ever to the rumored crybaby hero for saving him, for he was the one to take the punch. He had a chill in his spine that surely would have killed him, and just hopes for the boy to recover soon and thank him. And somewhere in a hospital lay a conscious Takemichi, unmoving and blank. The light in his eyes, devoid after what just occurred. Draken's near-death fate. Senju's death nearly happening. South's death nearly happening. All of this occurred too much at the same time. That this just left a burning question in his mind. Where did he go wrong? Where did he go wrong? This question kept circling Hanagaki Takemichi's mind because after realizing that 3 death fates occurred at the same time he was there, it dawned in him a conclusion. Was it his fault this happened? Should he have returned to the future? Should he have listened to Mikey on not looking for him or trying to save him, since all of this was supposed to be because he wished to save him? So, was this his fault? 'Cause it has to be right. Everyone had a death readied for them at the same time that night because he was there. He was there to save Mikey, and it led to a consequence of costing 3 lives in one night, to which he learns earlier in his bed that Draken had been saved, still unconscious from surgery, Senju disbanding Brahman, and unknown status for South and his gang if they will be disbanding or merging. But that went most out of his head, as the revelation of 3 deaths occurring because of him continues to heave him down with guilt. The others don't blame him, but he knows. Chifuyu too, even though he won't say anything. He knows that it's his fault, that Draken nearly dies because of him, Senju too, and the occasional occurrence for South too. Everyone had visited him, the former Tommen executives, the former Brahman executives, Kakanoi, despite being part of Kantomanji gang, and only visited once, the Mizo Mid gang, Emma and Yuzuha, and mostly, his most frequent and most needed visitor. Hina. Hey, Hina? Yeah? What is it, Takemichi-kun? Hina asks in a soft tone, concern laced within. Where did I go wrong? He asks so dully, to which worries Hina as she scoots her chair closer to him and places down the plate of apple slices near his bedside. What do you mean? She asks, holding his hand gently as to soothe him to talk whatever wants to say. Was it a wrong decision that I also joined in finding and trying to save Mikey? Despite him telling me from the video he left for me that he doesn't want me to save him, do you think I should have listened? He asks. Hina looks down to his face that he was covering by looking further down and slouching himself further in bed. She sighs. What makes you say that, Takemichi-kun? Takemichi clenches the blanket in response before replying. It's because I joined again in looking for him. Did Draken nearly died tonight? T that Senju nearly died. B because they were after me. And the fact I involved myself too much. That guy named South nearly died. Hina? He cuts off, sniffing and shivering, and everything he listed everything. She was about to respond when the next question and statement turned her blood cold. Should it have been better if I had died, Hina? Then everyone wouldn't have to suffer. I caused this, after all. I brought them nearly to their deaths. And if I further involve myself, sooner or later, the others is bound to suffer a terrifying death or fate soon. So it's best, isn't it? He looks up to her slowly with a crazed look in his eyes. Should I just go, Hina? She immediately hugs him, tight, but not too tight, but rather protectingly and comforting. Never, ever, say that again, Takemichi-kun. None of this is your fault. You were only trying to help. You were only trying to be a good friend. She comforts him, patting his hair and kissing the scalp while stroking him. Everyone doesn't blame you. If it weren't for you being there, those deaths your ability saw, they wouldn't be here by now, and you're safe and alive. Hanagaki only unclenches the sheets and taps the arms hugging him. No one blames you, Michai-kun, and if you ever need me, I'll always be here for you, okay? She assures him, and Hanagaki only hums blankly and letting his arms fall limp on the bed. When you're in pain, just cry it out, okay? But unbeknownst to her, Hanagaki Takemichi never felt like being to cry again. And the fact their deaths happened because he was there never left his consciousness, and the guilt never lifted. Though the fact of killing himself did leave him, though, for Hina's sake at least, and just by that conclusion, Hanagaki Takemichi concludes his decision. In order to avoid their deaths happening ever again, he'll leave. He'll run away. Where no one will know where he is, where no one will ever find him. If he's gone, their fates won't change, and they'll just probably reach the Bonton timeline, but at least they'd all be alive, right? He closes his eyes in Hina's arms and remains still. He'll have to say goodbye to everyone soon. Once he is done recovering in 2 days, he'll flee. Far from everyone, far from the string of fate that tugs every time he is around. For first of the 2 days left before Michai is released from the hospital, he's been visited frequently. The Mizo mid-gang, the Toman executives, from time to time, the Brahmin exec and Senju, to which Hina finally met in meeting a cool girl running a gang leader, much to Takemichi's comfort seeing Hina smile, and somehow an occasional visit from Kisaki, when he heard everything from Hina, scolding him too from time to time. Much to Takemichi's joy as well that Kisaki and him are now getting along well now. This happened the whole day, and Hina being the most frequent one, as she was Michai's most needed moral support. But little do they know that this will be the last time they would get to see him, the light of their darkness, their moral compass, their friend, partner, and their crybaby hero. It was late in the afternoon, it was nearing the evening, and no one had gotten to visit Michai on his last day yet, so Hina took it upon herself to but a delicious dessert for him to eat, and a new puzzle gift once his discharged. When she nears the hospital, he spots the other executives and Yuzua accompanying Hakai and Inupi about to enter the hospital when she was called out. Hina. She looks around to see Kisaki, and Hanma beside him, running up to her. Kisaki-kun, hello, are you here to visit Michai-kun as well? She inquires, looking back at Kisaki and Hanma. Why yeah, it's his last day here, right? So I thought I'd celebrate his discharge soon, he sheepishly replies, somehow with a small blush on his cheeks. Hina tilts her head. Did he just blush? She thought to herself, before Hanma clears the awkward situation for them. Well, Hanagaki is going to be waiting for us in his room now, and it is best we get there before the cakes expire, and, he looks back at Kisaki who was looking in the opposite direction. He grins at this with amusement, prevent a certain dessert melting from too much sweetness running through them. He snickers in response. While covering his mouth, Kisaki figured what Hanma was discreetly pointing out, so he just jabs on the side to stop, only confusing Hina further. Whatever. Let's just go in already. Kisaki intervenes and proceeds to walk into the building, followed by Hina and Hanma behind him, to which Hanma secretly leans towards her ear and whispered, If you don't get what I mean, princess. But after the crybaby saved his ass from being rammed by a truck and understanding his situation, he became a lovesick fool for the crybaby, just like everyone else now, he said softly, winking back at her. Hina was shocked at this. She knew the others garnered a certain liking to Takemichi. I mean, everyone he met did actually, so it was already obvious. But never did she expect it from Kisaki. Of course, she smiles at this, finding her friend getting along with Michai and somehow garnering feelings too. Hina never felt so full of joy, and maybe an occasional slight feeling of jealousy of the affections Michi is receiving, despite being oblivious to it. When the three arrive on the floor Michi and Draken were hospitalized in, she passes the room Draken currently was, to see him awake and well, already standing as he was getting discharged today. "Draken-kun, you're awake," she exclaims in joy, halting Kisaki and Hanma to look at the getting dressed Draken. The Toman executives were inside, along with Emma, who seems to have been there already this whole time. "Yeah, the doctor said I could go home now, but told me to refrain from moving too much as I am still recovering and the wounds are still tender," he groans afterward once he slides in his favorite black and white Haori on, courtesy of Emma bringing for him. "Are you gonna visit Michi as well? It's his last day today, too," she adds in. Draken only nods. "You have cake there, Hina, about to party out, huh?" Chifuyu points out the cake Hina is holding. She brings it up for everyone to see. "Yeah, I brought a puzzle gift for him too. The Mizo boys picked it out for him. They'll be arriving shortly with some sodas and cups and other snacks to celebrate his discharge," she explains. "Sounds like it's gonna be one hell of a blast," Baji chimes in with a cackling tone. "It sure will," someone yells. They all turn to see Makoto raising a plastic of paper cups, Yamagishi with plastic of 2 to 3 bottles of soda, Takuya with a small side dish in hand, while Atsushi, well, being the mediator of the idiots, only waved. "You guys came in time," Hina exclaims happily. "Yeah, not just them." A cheerful female voice echoes in the other end of the hallway. To see Senju alongside the Brahmin executives, who heard of the party to celebrate Michi's discharge, who's also holding some bags of chips and beer. "Well, the more the merrier, am I right, Draken?" Mitsuya asks. Draken only nods and gives a small gesture of respect to the Brahmin executives, to which they just wave it off. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go see him now and get this party started," Emma exclaims, dragging Senju and Yuzua with her towards Michi's room, Hina following behind and the boy in pursuit, sighing at the girl's antics. "Yuzua, wait for me," Hakai calls out as he quickens his pace as well. The girls were already nearing the place. Kisaki and Hanma already were ahead when suddenly, and the girls slowed down upon arriving near the room Michi was in when they heard Kisaki yelling. "What do you mean he's gone?" Everyone froze in place, confused as to what was going on. Hina was the only one who snapped out of her trance and entered the doorway of the room Michi was in. And yet, he's not in bed. "Kisaki-kun, what's going?" she asks him, who only looks back at the question with slight fury in his eyes, Hanma bearing the same irritation smoking a cig at the open window. Kisaki hesitates, slowly letting the poor nurse he's interrogating. As Hina slowly approaches him, she glances at the bed where Takemichi was supposed to be. "Where is Hanagaki?" Senju asks as everyone began piling in slowly, noticing the empty bed and a few papers placed on the bed. Hina asks again, "Kisaki, where is Takemichi-kun?" Kisaki hesitates again. Hanma only huffs loudly, before Kisaki responded with gritted teeth and a shadow looming on his face. "He's gone." "What?" "Hanagaki Takemichi ran away." "What do you mean he ran away?" Nahoya steps in the room, anger evident in his tone, demanding an answer, while Saya tries to hold his brother back, while the rest had piled in time to hear what Kisaki had just mentioned. "What I said, he ran away." Kisaki turned towards the nurse in the room, who's still shivering in fear. "Can you explain further what you told me exactly?" he inquires the nurse. Everyone looks back at her, expectantly, at what she has to say of Takemichi's disappearance. Last night, he wanted some paper and a pen, saying he wants to write something. He had been up until 10 in the evening writing them. I didn't know the contents, but when I came back this morning to check on him, his bed is left empty. Only, the paper he wrote on is left on it. She stutters as she points at the bed, where a stack of papers are placed, a pen on top of it. Draken moves towards this and observes the paper. "They're letters," he says out loud. "Letters?" Pa asks, confused. Everyone moves towards Draken, while the nurse discreetly and hurriedly leaves the rest in the room. "They're letters." Draken shuffles them. "They're all for us, each," he states, handing everyone each a letter Takemichi made. Pa-chin received one, Pei-yan, the twins, Mitsuya and Hakai, Draken and Emma, Yuzuna and Senju, Inupi, the Mizo mid-boys, Heck, even the Brahmin executives too. Wakasa, Takomi, and Benkei received one. Some also for Hanma and Kisaki, which shocked the two, not expecting one from him, and some letters were directed to those they can't reach, most likely as well Mikey, too. But that was left for Draken to give instead, begrudgingly. Some read theirs, some were hesitant as to what the contents were, or afraid of whatever he wrote that caused him to disappear. One letter stood out the most, and Draken held it out for everyone to hear, as it was directed to anyone who hears it. To anyone who reads this. I'm sorry I left so suddenly, I just couldn't handle it anymore. I nearly lost some people due to my interference on saving Mikey-kun. But rest assured, I am safe. I just want to go. I just want to be far away. Away from everything. I'm so tired of this. But I assure you, Hina, if you hear this, the disappearance I am talking about isn't the one we talked a day ago. I just want peace. I know you're all worried about me, and I am grateful. But please live your lives on your own, I assure you. The future will be wonderful for you guys if you just forgot about me. I nearly caused Senju, Draken, and heck even South's death on the battle. So I am not risking it anymore by having fate pull theirs when I am nearby. Some of you might be curious what that meant, but I assure you, it's nothing for you to worry about. I'm sorry for all the trouble I caused you all. This was my fault. I should have listened to Mikey about not saving him, and it nearly cost me. Therefore, I'll leave, and it's all for the best. Please take care of yourselves and never look for me. It's better this way so everyone will be safe. Thank you for everything. Sincerely, your crybaby hero. Draken was clenching at the paper as he read this. Atsushi was balling his hands in anger, and Hina. Oh dear, Hina was fuming and crying. Yamajishi Akushi calls out, his tone dark and deep. Why yeah, he stutters in reply, startled at the deep tone Akun was using. Where do you think Mikey is currently at right now? What? Wait, hold on, Yamajishi stutters, taking out his phone where he wrote for his information gathering habit. He's probably at the warehouses. There was a recent sighting of white-colored uniformed men gathering there, and in my conclusion, that's the hideout or meeting place of Kantumanji gang. Why? Yamajishi asks. And with that, Draken burst out of the room, followed by Atsushi and Hina, confused as to why they left such in a hurry. The others followed in pursuit, worry for their friends and what they might do. Some were just curious as to where they were going or what they'll do. Nonetheless, they worry that they were going to do something brash. Outside the opening gates of the hospital, 3 individuals were hesitating on entering the hospital. Dude, do you really have to visit the brat? The great Madaram Shin doesn't approve nor like this, Shin declares quietly. Will you just shut up about the great this, the great that, every damn time? Machizuki yells back in annoyance. South continues to stare at the hospital, contemplating on visiting the crybaby hero, who also saved him named Hanagaki Takemichi, as a thank you. He was about to take a step forward when all of a sudden, Draken emerges from the sliding doors, bearing a deep frown, followed by a redhead boy and pinkish-orange-haired girl in a ponytail, bearing the same frown on their faces. But the girl seems to be tearing up while having the same frown. South quickly hides along with the two as they watch the Taman executives, Brahmin executives, 3 girls, and 7 other boys leave the hospital, following the 3 who went ahead with a scowl on their expressions. Whoa, what's got them in such state? Aren't they gonna visit the hero boy? Madaram asks quietly. South silently observes. He felt something was off, so he decided to follow them. Let's follow them, something is about to happen, he declared. The 2 follow shortly, stalking the others wearyingly as to not get caught. At a certain area, at an abandoned large warehouse where the Kantu Manji gang was located, were the 2 other main executives of the Kantu gang, Sanzu and Kakanoi, besides Mikey, who was only leaning on a large crate behind him. And inside were not only the other members, but the others who joined him, that being Izana and Kakucho and the Heitani siblings, Ran and Rindu, who was just standing nearby. Are you proud of yourself, Manjiro? Izana taunts him. Mikey doesn't pay attention, but just blatantly stares off into the distance, but he does listen. I'm asking you again, are you proud of yourself? Izana asks again with ire evident in his tone. Not only did you just break off ties with the rest of your friends, but you nearly killed your closest friend. He pauses. He tries to intimidate his voice and glares at Mikey. You nearly killed your precious crybaby hero. It doesn't matter, Mikey interrupts Izana. He gets off the crate he's leaning at and approaches Izana, walking towards him slowly and menacingly. It's for the best anyway, and I'm sure, by the time he's discharged, he and others will just forget about me and live their lives and earn a proper future, he concludes as he stops in front of Izana. It's all a part of our plan. Izana is confused at the word our, but he concludes he meant Hanagaki and him, though he doesn't understand what that meant. What do you mean our plan? Kikucho asks on Izana's behalf. Mikey looks back at Izana and Kikucho, only to turn heels back around again. You wouldn't understand, he finishes. But before Izana could ask again, a nearby crate crashes outside the warehouse, startling the others of the sudden commotion. Oi, what the hell is going on? Sanzu asks in annoyance, loudly. 2 to 5 people emerges from outside, bearing bruises on their faces, and one was clutching their arm like it was broken. Sir, there is an intruder. Punch. A loud smack sent the announcing member towards the others, to only see Draken as the perpetrator and intruder. Ken-chin, Mikey silently calls out in surprise to see him in his hideout, alive and well. Only to be greeted with a scowling Draken, clenching a piece of paper in hand, followed by a guy with red hair, punching a member out cold too, and pink-haired girl in tow, and followed by that was his other members being beaten up by his old friends, the former Brahmin executives, Inupi, Takemichi's friends, and surprisingly Hanma and Kisaki were there too. When Draken tossed a member in front of everyone and the other rest, everyone went still. Oi, Mikey, someone needs to have a word with you, Draken yells out. Subconsciously, he walks out, Sanzu readying himself, following behind, as well as Kakanoi, despite a little hesitant to see Inupi there as well. The Heitani siblings ready themselves too and heads towards Mikey's side, and Izana and Kikucho remain where they were. What is it, Ken-chin? He asks dull and lazily, irking Draken a little of his nonchalant facade. Draken only stops at Sushi from going forward and only letting Hina go. Hina stomps her way towards Mikey with a shadow looming on her face, but he could some glistening light in her face as she strides towards him. Takeben. Slap. A harsh slap was heard, echoing throughout the place. It stiffened some people, irking them for a girl to suddenly hurt their commander. The others who arrived were surprised, but they didn't step up, as they felt doing something similar too, and let Hina handle it. How dare you, Hina murmured quietly, her voice sounding a little shaky. Mikey slowly looks back while holding his left cheek, nostalgia seeping through him. I trusted you, Tanjiro, she replies back, before quickly grabbing a handful of Mikey's shirt and nearing it enough her face with an angered and tearful expression. I trusted you. How could you do this, Takemichi-kun, when all he wanted to do was help you? And yet, you push him away like this? What kind of friend are you? She yells loudly with spite, fury, anger, sadness, and disappointment in her tone, her emotions pouring out that once filled her, now gushing out like a wild river in a stormy night. Oi, bitch, let go of my king right now. Stop, Mikey commanded. But Sanzu stops midway on hitting Hina, lower his weapon, and hesitantly moves behind Mikey, still cautious of what the girl might do. Command everyone to leave, the meeting ends for today, he orders Sanzu, and Sanzu immediately obliges and commanded everyone to leave. With an additional order, the executives remain, as well as the other intruders, Mikey says. The other member leaves, leaving the so-called intruders and the other executives of Kanto gangs such as Sanzu, Kakanoi, Izana, Kikucho, Ran, and Rindu behind. Once everyone cleared out, they were left with them inside. Silence continues before Mikey spoke out. It was for the best, Takabana, and you know this, he concludes. This further angers her, and she clenches his clothes deeply. By pushing him away like this, all his hard work, his sacrifices, sufferings, and the trauma he's faced saving us, and yet you had to the nerve to say it was for the best, she asks in an extremely angered tone, venom laced with it. It's better this way, Hina. If Michai and the others are away from this, they won't experience that future. It's much better this way. By suffering alone as well too. How self-centered can you get, Mikey-kun? The others who don't know, look at Hina and Mikey at their odd conversation. Sacrifice? Sufferings? Future? What was she blabbering about? Oi, girly, what you talking about? Who's suffering? And what future are you talking about? Ran, with obvious confusion of what's going on, asks further. The ones who knew contemplate if they should reveal the truth, and only one concludes their answer. I'll tell them. Kisaki steps up. Oi, Kisaki, what are you? You can't just reveal that without his permission, Chifuyu scolds Kisaki, who only steps closer to the center, ignoring Chifuyu's warning. He's not here anyway, and what better way to further explain is to tell them the truth of his actions, he finishes once he stops at the center, slightly behind Hina. He sighs before dropping the bomb. Hanagaki Takemichi is a time traveler. The word time traveler passes through their ears as one scoffed in response. Okay, seriously, a time traveler? What is this, some sci-fi movie? If you're going to explain better, Kisaki, make it believable. Sanzu scoffed in response, unbelieving of the explanation. Kisaki only looks at him and glares. You want proof? Fine, let's start with the first one. He turns around and points at Draken. Exhibit A, Ryuguji Ken. When the Battle of August 3rd happened, he was stabbed there, left bleeding to death. And who saved him? Hanagaki himself couldn't have known about his situation during that fight, so how did he? He knew that Draken was about to die that night, therefore, his reason for saving him before he dies. Shock revels on some of the Taman executives who knew about the fight. Hanma, too, as he was part of it as well during that night. Kisaki then turns around and points at Baji. Exhibit B, Baji Keisuke. When the battle against Mobius happened, he rushed towards Baji and shielded him from Kazutora. As Kazutora was manipulated by me to go and kill Baji, he couldn't have known of the plan, so how did he? He saw his fate and decided to intervene and took the hit for him so he wouldn't die, because he knew Baji Keisuke was to be killed that day. Kazutora as well if he hadn't stopped Mikey from further beating the crap out of him. Baji falters and Kazutora shivers at this. They try to take in that the fact the two of them were about to die that day if Hanagaki didn't take that blow, and him shielding Kazutora from Mikey. They turned to Chifuyu if it was true, as he was Takemichi partner, to which he only nods. Kisaki turns to Hakai and points at him. Exhibit C, Shiba Hakai. The battle at Christmas was something I set up Yasuha, Hakai's sister, to kill their eldest brother, and that Hakai would take the blame, and I would be able to manipulate him. But how did it all stop? Hanagaki knew. He knew of Teiju's death, the battle, and all of the facts behind Hakai's intention to kill Teiju as well. Therefore, saving the Teiju siblings from certain doomed future, and causing me to get fired in the process. Hakai shivers at the thought, and to think he would have become a murderer that night if Takemichi didn't stop him. Mitsuya comforts Hakai as he tries to listen further, feeling guilt wash over his former division member. He turns to what seems to be outside. Exhibit D, Sano Emma. Before the battle against Tenjiku, Izana's gang, he ordered for Emma to be killed that night. But during that time, Hanagaki was there. So when he knew she was to die, he shielded her from the hit, only getting mildly injured and surviving, costing Hanagaki to be the one severely injured. Kisaki looks and point at Izana and Kakucho. Exhibit D1, Izana and Kakucho, despite being severely injured. He knew the two of you were gonna die that night, and much to his stubbornness, he pushed you two away from the shot that was supposed to kill you if it weren't for him interfering and taking the shot to his arm. Izana and Kakucho shivers at the information. They did try to understand why he did save them, and to think the both of them were to die that night, especially Emma, Izana's half-sister, was saved by him because he knew she was going to die. Lastly, Exhibit E, me. When he chased me and Hanma that night, I was crossing the road mindlessly as we conversed. That's when I didn't realize a truck was coming towards me, and yet he knew, despite some part of the street covering the upcoming truck, and with quick thinking, he dragged out of the street and took the hit, and it did, nearly killed him that night as he tried to save me. Kisaki shivered upon remembering that night he was saved. Hanma stepped closer to Kisaki and rubbed his back, with a thankful look in his eyes, knowing despite being Takemichi's enemy during that time, he still saved him. Kisaki composed himself before continuing. He stared at everyone inside the warehouse, with awe, guilt, and realization evident on their faces. All the actions he did on saving others regardless of his own safety was because he knew that the others were about to die. He pauses before continuing, and it's also because he knew everyone's distant future. He tried to change the future of his friends. He tried to change them all on his own, risking his health, sanity and safety just to bring them a happy and better future. Even me, he concludes. Silence fills them at this sudden information. Those who heard were slightly unbelieving, but they were sure were slowly understanding why the boy kept saving them regardless of his safety. So, wait, the night of the battle, he saved me in South. Did he know I was going to die that night? And that South was to die by Mikey's hands? Senju, who was behind Takemichi, calls out to have it confirmed. If he saved you that night, then yes, he very much knew you were going to die that night. Even this South guy Kisaki concludes for her, to which shocks Senju even further, as well as her older brother, who suddenly felt really grateful of the boy for saving his baby sister, Wakasa and Benkei, too. Outside the warehouse, South was listening in, alongside Maderam and Mochizuki, also shocked at the sudden information, and South suddenly felt a heavy guilt build in him as he heard of Hanagaki Takemichi's deeds. This has to be a joke. All right, my king, Sanzu stutters, glancing towards Mikey, asking for a confirmation that all of those deeds Hanagaki did were just tall tales, but when he turns to him, he finds him shaking, slightly, confirming Kisaki's statement. Who else knew? Izana chirps in, as everyone looks at him. Whoever in this room, raise your hand if you knew about his time-traveling ability this whole time. Some were hesitant, but when Kisaki raised his hand, the rest follows, as Hina, Draken, Mikey, and Shifuyu raised their hands at the question. Izana further sighs, overwhelmed with the information that dawned on him. And now it's fine, you have him back. He won't be going to save me anymore. I don't need saving, Mikey concludes. Yet you have to be that selfish? You causing yourself so much grief and suffering, something he didn't want you to suffer in. And yet you ruined it, but letting yourself further in the darkness without asking for help. Not even once. You caused further suffering to everyone's future by bearing such burdens all by yourself. He didn't need you to tell him to help you, because that's what friends do. Hina shaking Mikey back and forth harshly, Sanzu still in shock that he didn't even bother. When I first met you, Mikey-kun, I slapped you because I thought you were hurting Takemichi, but he defended you, someone he barely knew, so I let it slide. But to think, I'd be standing in front of you with a harsh slap in the face, to find out you broke my trust on letting you love him. Mikey's eyes widen at her statement. What? You think I didn't know? I knew this entire time, Mikey-kun. Hina looks around the others. I knew everyone here did. Some of you had the slightest bit of affections towards Takemichi-kun. Unlike him, I wasn't oblivious to it, and I let it be since I knew you'd love him just as much as I did when we dated. She looks back at Mikey. But to think I would be this naive as to let you have his love and ruin it with your selfishness. She lets go of his shirt and steps away towards Atsushi. Mikey only stares back at her in revelation. Your decision to suffer alone caused others to suffer since you didn't ask for help, and yet Michai-kun did for you since he's your friend. And yet you pushed him and the others away, justifying that, saying it was for the best of the others so they could reach their happy future. She paused as she further slouches on Akun's chest. That's just selfish talk, Mikey-kun, when all of this never happened if you just called out for help. Now you're dragging everyone's happy future that Michai-kun worked hard for down the drain, and now he's gone, leaving us all like this. She concludes as she takes Akun's hand and starts to leave with the other Mizo mid-boys. The fact Takemichi was gone froze Mikey's blood cold. Takemichi left? Before she does leave, she halts at the entrance and looks behind her slightly, not turning around. If I ever find him again, I'll make sure he never gets a chance to be with you and the rest of your gang for as long as I am alive. And if you really want me to forgive you, earn his and mine's trust again. Then we'll talk about chances. She starts to walk away. For as long as I'm concerned, I am his ex-girlfriend. I know all his suffering and pain. I'll decide if you're worth of his love at all. Everyone was left momentarily stunned, but also with renewed ambition. Senju steps up. I may have said I would disband Brahman in order to save Takemichi, but this just changes my mind. She glares back at Mikey. Remember this day, Mikey. From this day forth, I'll revive Brahman and take you down. For his sake and the gang community's honor. I won't fail, she declares, as she glares at him and Sanzu, her other older brother, followed by Benkei, Wakasa, and Takemichi, sharing the same renewed ambition in honoring Hanagaki's deeds. Now only leaving Tommen, Kisaki, Hanma, and Inupi, Draken looks back at Mikey. And we'll make sure to save you. On his behalf, we will succeed, so better watch out, Mikey. We'll bring you down no matter what, he declares, as well as the Tommen executives, alongside Inupi, Hanma, and Kisaki. Leaving the other Kantomanji gang, shocked and unmoving at this sudden declaration, they felt like something big will change in their lives because of this declaration, and that it was going to shake the entirety of Japan. Before the Brahmin executives and Senju leaves, South, Madara, and Mochizuki contemplates what to do. Well, that was certainly something, Mochi concludes. So, the little hero was saving everyone by time traveling, huh? That's certainly something I didn't expect as an explanation of his actions, Shin concludes, with shock evident on his tone, gone his narcissistic personality and downright shaken. South couldn't comprehend that the fact that scrawny, small, and petite-looking boy named Hanagaki Takemichi saved him from being killed by Mikey that night, and that he actually suffered more than just saving him, but the rest of his friends too. Anger filled him, as well pity and gratefulness for saving him. He stands up from where he sat and looks up in the sky. I've decided. Mochi and Shin looked up at him. I'll revive Rokuhara as well, and bring honor to the name of my savior and bring down Mikey and his gang, and I'll sure be as hell be the one to knock that little midget down myself, South concludes. As much as the two hesitantly disagrees, they can't help but feel pity for the rumored crybaby hero's deeds to just go waste like this, and the fact they want to beat Mikey and his gang overwrites their hesitance even further. Let's pound some little shits, shall we, South? Shin asks as he stands up and cracks his knuckles. South grins, and the other two follow him, as they begin their journey of reviving Rokuhara Tandai again. And unbeknown to Japan, this declaration of renewed ambition would shake the entirety of Japan's criminal underworld. A new era of the gang to criminal organizations would cause riot and danger through anyone who comes across the renewed three deities, revived from the deeds of a certain hero. Unbeknownst to him as well. Takabana Hinata, the first reason Hanagaki time traveled for, when she heard that his boyfriend had been traveling back and forth from a terrible future and back just to save her from her fate in the future. She was so touched. At the same time, she felt guilty that her boyfriend was slowly succumbing to darkness after seeing not only her death in the future over and over, but the death of his friends and the people he cared for ending up in terrible futures that it was too awful to describe. When she heard all of this from his boyfriend, her instinct immediately flipped like a light switch. Watching her boyfriend carry all of this burden by himself was tiring. As she can tell from the slowly dulling ocean blue eyes of his, she immediately wanted to take away all of his pain and suffering. But even she knows there's nothing she could do. She wasn't like Michi, strong, courageous, and selfless in more ways than one. She can't even compare herself to him, as he burns brighter than the others, with his selfless self, kind and courageous demeanor, and with a strong mind and will to endure such pains just for the ones he loved. He was amazing. And yet, here she was, wallowing in her room as regret and guilt seep into her for being a bad girlfriend, not being able to help. She can only hope that wherever he was, he finds himself again and return, so she could apologize for making him go through such length just to save her and his friends, even Mikey, the other reason he came back again from the future. It sickens her more just thinking about him, the selfish bastard who can't even accept a simple open hand in kindness just because he doesn't want the others to suffer with him. It's pure selfishness. He doesn't realize Michi and Mikey's friends are suffering even more, seeing him in such despair, so she slapped him, the same thing she did when she first met him, thinking he was hurting Michi but dragging him to unreasonable fights. How funny, she shouldn't have trusted him back then. The Mizo mid-boys were quiet in their lunchtime at the roof. This is where Michi and them would hang out now and eat lunch in high school. But having him not with them felt out of place. Even with the cheery morning sun, it felt cold and odd to be there. After what they heard about Takemichi, his sufferings of saving everyone just so they could have a happy future. He suffers by himself because of the traumatizing deaths and horrid futures he's seen. They all felt guilty. The food they're even eating felt like a bother in their throat, but they knew they have to eat and live. They didn't want to waste their lives, something Takemichi has been preserving for them, but the damp mood never left as they ate in silence. Takuya felt guiltier as he was Michi's childhood friend, and yet, He was a horrible one for not realizing the suffering his friend had to go through on his own. Akun or Atsushi also felt as worse as Takuya, as he was Takemichi's best friend and group leader. Close enough was Chifuyu or Hina, or Draken and never mind, and yet, he did nothing. He didn't even realize his state of depression until Hina and Kisaki explained yesterday. He felt awful for not knowing, or not even asking if he was okay. It felt awful for him. Makoto and Yamagishi, usually the most boisterous and energetic duo of the group, now remained silent as they ate. Heck, even Makoto hasn't even babbled anything perverse for the past few minutes, nor was Yamagishi gushing about a piece of gossip about the delinquent world. Both were too down to even try to bring up the gang community ever again or anything stupid after what happened to their friend, feeling guilty and awful. The four wallow in silence eating lunch, one thing going through their minds, and that was hoping their friend was okay. The Tomen executives separate themselves for a while, but they did agree altogether in one silence that they'll continue to be with Brahman, under Senju's command once Senju builds enough support to recreate her gang, but while they wait, they separated themselves from each other, assessing their feelings that were held back and hidden to resurface for the crybaby hero. Draken was the most guilty. After he recovered from his wounds, trying to protect Michai and Senju, he immediately thought of going to Takemichi to tell him it wasn't his fault, as he knew that Brat always blames himself for every bad thing that happened in their lives, like a certain troublesome person he knows, and now knowing he was too late, he can only seclude himself to guilt. When Takabana expressed herself that she knew about the others having feelings for her boyfriend, and was okay with them, he felt relieved when he heard that. He always felt ashamed for thinking and having feelings for a guy who's already in a relationship. Ever since he was saved by him saving Tommen and his friends, the people he cared about, his feelings grew deeper for him, enough that he wished he was Michi's boyfriend. But now, he was little too late, as the person who holds his affections for has now fled their lives, away from him and the others. He can only hope that maybe after being with himself alone for a while, he'll return to them, and when he does, he'll tell him exactly how he feels. But first things first, when he comes back, was to apologize and thank him for all the trouble he sacrificed for him and the others. Mitsuya, Hakai, and Yuzua were together, well, add in the occasional Teiju who came to visit, and when he heard of the story, he immediately went feral as to find Mikey and knock some sense into him. As he describes, the three felt warm at the gesture, but the guilt eating them up never left. Hanagaki may be with the 1st Division before, but he was very well his old captain the 2nd Division, so he still hold responsible for him, and yet, he ignored his sufferings when he needed a comforting gesture the most. He may have not known, but he should have guessed when his eyes began turning dull and lifeless. His feelings for him started trivial as interest when Mikey himself grew interested in him, but slowly but surely, he made way to his heart, but saving his friends and those who he cared for much more. After hearing he sacrificed his sanity just to save him and the rest. That immediately sealed the deal for Mitsuya. He desperately wished he could see him and thank him, love him more as he deserves, but now he was gone, fled from them because of how tired he was. It was understandable, as he too felt the same thing before, but he had the feeling he'll come back. He'll just have to be patient, and Mitsuya wasn't only a sensible person, he was very patient, so he can wait for him, and when he does return, he'll make sure to clear his feelings for him. Hakai and Yuzuha, alongside Teiju, share the experiences they had with Michai. From his dedication, determination, and strong will, the three had a mutual bond over a single person. The same person who saved Teiju from death, the one who stopped Yuzuha and Hakai from committing something terrible, and the one who united the three of them again. The Shiba siblings never felt grateful than before to meet such a wonderful person in their lives. The light that guided them to get along again and be a proper family once more. More so as the three shared feelings of affection towards the crybaby. But now that he was gone, they felt gloomy. Even if they were together, they felt empty without him. Realizing this, they felt horrible and simply wishes to see him and hug him. Thank him for all he's done. Pa and Pei were alone in the old Musashi shrine, the very core of Tommen, and the place they all felt home and safe at, as all of their memories were embedded on this very ground. It was even more comforting when Hanagaki came into their lives. When they first met him, they were a bit skeptical of him, as he just suddenly appeared out of nowhere, catching their commander's eye like it was nothing. But slowly in due time they were together with the crybaby, they came to realize of his uniqueness, how he dedicated himself for Tommen and their friends like a true Tommen member. They immediately felt like a proud older brother, more so after what they heard the truth of Hanagaki. But now, he was gone, and even though Tommen disbanded long ago, the Musashi Shrine felt cold, more so than before, and they never liked it. The cold winds brushing their faces felt like frostbite rather than soothing comfort. They miss him, the crybaby hero of Tommen and their ideal little brother. The twins were busy, busy enough to try and distract themselves from thinking too much by creating new ramen recipes, especially the ones Hanagaki found the most delicious when he came to taste test for the two. But now, no one was here to tell them, it's delicious, or this is the best ramen I have ever tasted, or the occasional praise he would say, you worked hard for it, I am proud of you guys. Hanagaki Takemichi immediately made way to the twins' hearts for his bright and cheery personality, and the fact he was a hero for their friends, risking his life just for them made them even happier on meeting him. But now, he's gone. Their home was very gloomy without him, gone the bright smile that always cheers their home whenever he came to taste test or just hang with the two. It truly felt too cold in their homes, despite their stoves cooking and ramen broth emanating heat in the room, it truly felt cold without him. Baji, Kazutora, and Shifuyu were in the junkyard, the very place Kazutora and Baji should have died, if it weren't for the crybaby hero. The two were still quite shaken at the news. Kazutora, who first became the center of hatred for Mikey because he killed his older brother, had finally reunited and reconciled with him thanks to Hanagaki, and when the day he had taken that knife for Baji and blocked him from Mikey's dark impulses, he never felt so grateful. Both for him and Baji's sake. While Baji may have been Takemichi's captain in the first division, but deep down, he's also his friend, and yet, he never once paid close attention to all his sufferings, even if his former vice-captain, Shifuyu, never told him of his situation. He should have at least reached out, asked him if he was okay. Heck, he may not be good at these comfort, mushy crap, but he sure as hell would be mushy if it meant to ease the burden off of Michi. He, Kazutora, and Mikey had a very poor childhood after Kazutora had accidentally killed Shiny Cairo, Mikey's older brother. He honestly thought if he had sacrificed himself, maybe the two would reconcile, but he never thought it would further worsen it. Not until Michi took the brunt of it all, no questions asked, he did it oh so selflessly, without asking anything in return that he felt bad for it. But it was thanks to that, did Kazutora, Mikey, and Baji had reconciled from their past. But now, he was gone. All because of his stupid, childhood friend, can't accept the help the crybaby hero gave him. He's not even asking anything to be returned. The two had further asked Shifuyu, Takemichi's partner, for his time travels for all the suffering he faced, to which they learned as well that Shifuyu had died as well in the future, one too many times, from Kisaki's hands, and Mikey's too. The two felt extreme anger now towards Mikey, but they knew it won't do them good. Therefore, as the Tommen's executives concluded, they will bring down and save Mikey, all in honor of Hanagaki's deeds, not only his deeds, but they'll do it for him, as what they from Michi's girlfriend, that she accepts them on going after her boyfriend, they'll do it for him. And to hell, anyone is damned if they get in their way of honoring Hanagaki. Inupi was rattled to the core. When Inupi first encountered Takemichi at the Christmas battle, he found him intriguing. He resembles so much the first-generation president of BD, which he and Coco agreed on having him as the new 11th president. He always seems to carry a huge burden on him, something he noticed when he spent his time with him. Now he understands why now, after the guy Kisaki, who he remembers the one who plotted Teiju's death, explained about Hanagaki's ability to time travel and the purpose and reason he does for it. It became clear sense for him, and it felt like the sky came crashing down on him as the guilt filled him. Not only was he Hanagaki's vice president in BD before, but he was also his friend, someone he could trust as a subordinate if he ever so sees it as such. And to think, he failed as being a supportive friend and subordinate to him, someone he found admirable because he failed to recognize his sufferings when it was clear as day. He now only realizes well, the times he spent with Hanagaki. His feelings of admiration had turned to affections and love after he heard of his deeds. So, resolve rushing through him, he's gonna honor Hanagaki's work of saving people as his friend and subordinate, and thus making sure he won't fail a second time. For his sake and the others, he'll continue his legacy until the bitter end. Emma was well and stuck in place. She can't get out of her home after what she had heard. After whatever truth was revealed that day. He couldn't expect that the day Izana, her half-brother, ordered for her death in getting revenge on Mikey, was the day she was supposed to die. If it weren't for Takemichi, not only that, if it weren't for him, his brothers would have died or ended up in a cruel fate, even though it is already happening. She found herself crying in her room, begging for forgiveness and muttering gratitude towards Takemichi, whom she wishes she can express her sorrow and gratitude towards. Hanagaki has done so much for the Sano family, more than she can realize, to Tommen, to her friends, to her family, and those around her that she cares for. She really wishes she can see him, and thank him like a dozen times and apologize a billion times for his hard work and sacrifice. But she can't. Now that Hanagaki had fled, she can't. But somehow, something within her tells her that he'll come back again. So, she resolves herself in honoring Takemichi as thanks by saving her brother as well. She knows Izana, so he might do the same thing, discreetly as he works for Mikey now. But until then, she'll provide any help she can give. It's the only way she can repay Hanagaki all the sacrifice he did for her friends and family. Senju was stuck in her home with Takemichi, Benkei, and Wakasa, plotting the renewal of Brahman. Regardless if Mikey might destroy them again, they'll continue to get up and bring him down. The same attitude of Hanagaki Takemichi. Senju, who heard of Hanagaki's ability, felt grateful he had saved her. She never expected she would die that night. If it weren't for him, she would have hated to leave Brahman on their own, and her brother too, and death terrified her before. But she doesn't fear it anymore. After hearing all the deaths Hanagaki had to see and endure seeing, and the suffering and trauma he experienced time traveling, she never felt renewed at his determination more than ever. So she'll rebuild Brahman and take down Mikey, in honor of her friend and her crush, to which she only realizes after she realized the meaning of Hanagaki rescuing her. Takemichi, Benkei, and Wakasa look hell-bent on recreating Brahman, because when they heard from the guy with glasses back at the warehouse about Hanagaki Takemichi, they felt like they were indebted to him for saving Senju, and them in a sort of way. When the three first recruited Hanagaki for Brahman, the three thought the same thing in their minds. He's just like him. And yet he's not. But something about him gave them the same comfort and relief Shinakairo would give them whenever they were with him and Black Dragons. But now that he was gone, they felt incomplete without him. But when Hanagaki came, they felt the similarities and they felt free once more from their despair after taking a looking at those pure ocean blue eyes of his, desiring to give him all they have. But now he was gone, all because Mikey, Shin's little brother, couldn't accept a damn single help from his friends just because he wishes to save them by drowning himself in despair and suffering himself. Ready to smack some sense into him, they'll do it by rebuilding Brahman and bringing Mikey down, in honor of Brahman, in honor of Shin, and honor of the crybaby hero, Hanagaki Takemichi. In his life, there was only one person who shone brighter for him, and that was his king, his god, Mikey. With his determination and charisma, he vowed to be of service to him and no one else as his servant alone, and no one was deserving of his mercy. That all changed when he met Hanagaki Takemichi at first back when Tommen was still active. He got curious of the boy his king had gotten interested in, not only his king, but the other Tommen executives as well, but it bloomed a sense of interest on the boy. It only grew deeper in interest when he had risked his life so many times when he was around. It almost looked like he was dedicating himself to the gang his king had grown fond of, finding him as if he was like him, dedicated to his king and his king alone. But what deepened it furthermore is when Kisaki had told him of his deeds, and that dawned on him. He's as subservient as him for Mikey. He went out of his way to shed tears, blood and risk his life and sanity just for Tommen, just for the rest, just for Mikey, and since it was for Tommen, he even included him too. He dedicated himself to saving him too, and no one had ever done such a gesture for him. It intrigued him so much that he wishes to dive in further know this Hanagaki Takemichi, the titled crybaby hero in the delinquent world, savior of many lives from different gangs, and now a time traveler only to a known few. He wants to know more. He wants to see more of him himself. Izana and Kikucho, as much as everyone the two assumes, was vividly shocked at the truth that was dropped upon them. And that was Hanagaki Takemichi being a time traveler. A time traveler who has been going back and forth on saving all of them, by suffering alone of the results of the future he works hard of, saving Mikey, saving Tommen, saving the Black Dragons, saving him and Kakucho. Izana has always thought he was beyond saving, and that he might even drag Kakucho with him, and yet here he was. Takemichi had saved him despite his expectancy of not being able to be saved. He never felt this way before, grateful and moved of his actions, going out of his way on saving him and Kakucho despite the risk of him dying and all the trauma he's been enduring. If he was in his shoes, he has no doubts he would have gone insane by at least 3 tries. And yet, here he was, Hanagaki, with will and determination stubborn as a mule. He endured it all, just for his friends. He felt moved, and so does Kakucho. Finding his old friend to go through such length to save them both and the others, filled them with warmth, wishing they could see him and make him theirs, for all the sacrifice he has done, the two ready to give the world to him, even if they have to betray Mikey along the way for it. They will, but until then, they'll find him first, and once they do, they'll make him theirs. Ran and Ryandu had a keen small interest in the crybaby hero, especially when they first saw his first sacrifice during the battle against Mobius. The two had witnessed his resolve firsthand during that time, and that's what captivated the two to grow interested in him. Again and again, they hear of his heroic deeds, and when they saw what he did during the battle against Tenjiku and Tommen, their interest turned a lot deeper into curiosity as well. Like, why was he doing this? Why go out of his way, sacrificing his life and endanger himself further for such ruthless delinquents? That is until yesterday, their questions were answered. Interest had turned to curiosity. Curiosity had turned to fascination, and fascination had turned to admiration, and, as cheesy as it sounded, they fell for him. To find such a person to go out of his way for the sake of his loved ones, for the sake of his friends, risking it all just for them, they wondered what it would feel like if that dedication and affections were directed toward the siblings. How indulging it would be. They wished to get to know him more, and to do just that, they'll find him, as per Mikey's request. They'll find him and earn his love and feel that dedication he has given the others of. After all, they weren't described as one of the most selfish siblings for nothing if they didn't desire something just for themselves. Now, Mikey, he has gone through a serious thought of what Takabana had told him. And he now only comes to realize that she was right, he was being selfish. That he was dragging his friends even further into that dark future Michi had told him off by suffering alone. After all, the others have been going out of their way just to save him too, and that he's wasting his Takemichi's efforts by pushing him away and rejecting him. He's never felt guilty all his life, but he can't look back now, and so, he'll have to suffer the consequences and continue forward. But if there is something Mikey wants to fix, that is to apologize to Takemichi. His sweet, caring, and determined Takemichi, the very person he only gave his love and affections for, who was now shattered and broken because of him, and all he wants to do is find him, apologize and thank him, properly love him this time, but with Hina and the others, he'll have to deal with them first. Takemichi was his, no one else but his. He continued running, he ran and ran, like he never had before. He had fled from Shibuya so he could get away from everything. All the burden he had endured broke like a vase, trying to hold large amounts of water that has filled to the brim until it shattered to pieces trying to keep it together. And the emotions he had buried deep within him gushing out like a dam breaking and a tsunami had been unleashed. He didn't care as to where he was headed. All he knows was he needed to run. He left the hospital way in the middle of the night, right after he wrote the letters he made for his friends, even to Mikey, if the others are willing enough to give it to him. He had fled, not bringing a single thing with him except his flip phone and a few yen in his pockets. He first took a train all the way to the countryside, and from there he continued to run, all the way from different urban towns to towns, ignoring the people that looked his way or even the people who would ask what he needed, or worried as to why he was running, or the most usual, gossiping that he would hear when zooms passed them. He didn't pay them much attention as he just wanted nothing but to run away, not looking back once, and ran. Far, far away from them, a place where I won't hear from them for a while, nor will they hear anything from me. He continues to run, ignoring blatant stares and murmurs. He was nearing the forest of this urban town, but regardless, he runs, no longer looking back. But as he zooms past a few more people, he heard a certain word. Mount Sagiri. Hanagaki hadn't paid attention much. But it seems he was headed for this Mount Sagiri, as mentioned by the passing bystanders, but few words also wormed in his ears as he passed through. Dangerous. Lost. Awful. Demons. Die. These were the words that wormed in his ears as he passed them. Some were understandable, and others were not. He couldn't comprehend what the other bystanders meant by demons, or much as he cares. It was probably some urban belief of this town that this place holds in belief, superstitions of demons in the mountain. He wouldn't mind, actually, if it were the case. If there were demons in the forest mountains, he would very much like to be killed by them. At least he wouldn't have to suffer anymore. But a part of him doesn't want to meet one, if they are ever real, because his conscience keeps pestering him of his promise to Hina. To stay alive. And with that, he reached the mountains, but he still continues to run, somehow tripping here and there, but still continues. It was about to be late in the evening. Again and again, Michi doesn't stop. He continues running, wherever the hell his legs and feet take him. He doesn't care. But, somehow, one wrong footing causes him to trip and tumble, his face scrunching to the ground as his face palmed with the rough ground. He wanted to continue running, but thanks to his continuous running and not resting, not once eating or drinking, fatigue had consumed him, and his limbs no longer functioning as he wished. He turned himself around, his back now lying on the ground, and his face up in the clouds. He continues to stare at the sky as its orange hue slowly fades. He momentarily closes his eyes before suddenly feeling drips of water splatting on his face. Drip. 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 Before he knew it, it had rained in the forest. A large and cold shower of rain had poured in, and it was unbearably cold, but somehow he felt numb to it. His stomach growled, his legs stiff and uncooperative, and his eyes, closing slowly as fatigue seeped in, consuming him. Is this how I die? Hunger and frozen to death? He thought to himself silently. He continues to lay there as the water of the rain started to get a little harsher in falling. And there, somehow, if you look closely enough, he finally started crying. His eyes closed and water was falling from his face. Unknown if he was crying or if it was just the rain making him look like he was crying. Regardless, he continued to weep in silence whilst lying on the now drenched soil he's laying on. I'm sorry, Hina. Sorry, everyone. I am sorry for failing you all like this. But it would seem this is goodbye. He apologizes in his thoughts, his eyes closed, ready for the world to consume him and leave him there in the freezing cold rain and freeze to death. Unknown to him due to fatigue, he didn't hear the footsteps that walked towards him. He didn't hear nor felt anything, as the footsteps were quiet and light on their feet. The individual loomed over him, with an umbrella on his right hand. He crouches down to Takemichi's level, touching his forehead and nudging him, seeing if he was still alive. Young man, are you all right? A gruff old voice rang in Hanagaki's ears. His eyes were still covered with liquid that he couldn't see who was calling out to him. But the only thing that registered in his mind was the color of red and blue before passing out. It felt warm. Somehow, Hanagaki felt the surroundings to be soft, warm, and delicious. Something smelled wonderful and salivating, thanks to his stomach being empty for days now, and was now dying for something to eat or drink. He slowly opened his eyes, only to see a roof was over his head. He shifts a little in his place, only to realize there was a small towel on his forehead, as it fell off him when tries to get up. He was now covered in a blue yukata with water patterns and clouds. His clothes were changed, and in front of him was a small fire surrounded by sand, and on top of it was a pot cooking the food he smelled the moment he woke up. Lying on the bed, he pushes the blanket that covered him, despite the warmth it gave in this cold, rainy night. He glances around the room he was currently in. It was designed in a traditional and antique-looking way. Someone had saved him, sheltered him, prepared food for him, and even took care of him, as he seems to have harbored a fever for staying in the rain. It seems you're all better now, an unfamiliar voice called out to him. He looks forward, slightly on guard, only to see an old man. His face was hidden behind a red oni mask, and he was wearing the same type of yukata he's wearing right now. And he guesses quickly he was the one who saved him out there. Yes, I'm feeling much better now. Thank you for helping me. Hanagaki thanked the old man by bowing to him slightly for his gesture of kindness. Don't mention it, kid. The old man sits down beside the cooking pot, holding 2 bowls and a spoon to go with, and 2 cups, filled with water as he placed them down. He began scooping an amount of hot pot soup onto the bowl and handed it over to Takemichi. You must be starving. You looked like you haven't eaten or drank in days, boy. Nor even slept, he points out, as Hanagaki hesitantly takes his bowl from the kind and observant man in front of him, replying with sheepish laugh and smile. Why yeah, I haven't for a few days now, he tells the man, as he clasped his hands together and tells his gratitude for receiving the food, and then scooping a spoonful of the food and started eating, controlling himself from trying to devour the food like a hunger-crazed animal. The old man also continues to eat, but he also continues to question. Why didn't you? He asks, followed by him drinking from his cup. Only the mouth can be seen as the mask remains on his face, covering the eyes. He's quite odd, eating and drinking while still wearing that Oni mask. I was running away from something, he replies, looking away from the old man a little, feeling as if the old man was boring his eyes deeply at him, despite the mask. Running away, he pauses, drinking again from the cup before continuing. From what, if I may ask? He inquires permission from Hanagaki. Something I want to get away from, Takemichi replies, dull and quiet. Hopefully not loud enough for the old man to hear. But he didn't further ask what he was running away from, but judging how he looked saddened and guilty replying, it was something rather heavy he's probably running away from. I see, was all Urokodaki replied with. Hanagaki was thankful he didn't further ask, thankful for being sensitive about it. They both continued to eat until Takemichi asked him this time. Oh, right, I didn't quite get your name, mister. He pauses eating, urging the man to tell him. Right, of course, my apologies for the late introductions. Urokodaki immediately places his bowl down and the spoon on top before facing Michai. My name is Urokodaki Sakanji, he gruffly introduces. Hanagaki Takemichi, it's nice to meet you. Urokodaki-sen, Michai happily replies. A few days have passed. The boy he found in the woods continues to live with him, and during the time he spent with the child, he concludes he was probably around 16 years old. He found a few things about the child as well. Like how he's unusually helpful. When he began living with him, as he told him previously, he ran away from home, which concerns him. If his parents knew, he would usually help him in getting a bit of money to provide for him and himself by taking small jobs in the nearby town. He would take one after another just to earn some living, and he seems rather experienced with it, wondering if the boy worked part-time before. Another thing he noticed is his odd occasional nightmares. When the days the two slept, he would sometimes find the boy awake in the middle of the night, either sobbing, hyperventilating, and muttering words such as "I'm sorry" or "it's my fault" over and over. It concerned him to no end. But the nightmares only happen in an odd number of times. But he decides he'll confront him about it once he shows signs of a nightmare happening again. When he also first met the boy, and the time they ate together the night he found him lying in the woods under the cold rain, the one thing that caught most of his attention was his eyes. They looked rather enthralling, to say the least. They were a beautiful shade of blue, a color of the sky and sea altogether. But what he found about them is that they seemed to have a duller shade of it, indicating something, like he was carrying something rather burdensome and heavy for a child like him to carry, and emotions such as guilt, sorrow, and extreme sadness were evident in those pure blue ocean eyes. It made Urokodaki's protective and caring nature raise alarm bells to unknown heights, but he contained it, for now, feeling as if the topic could very well bring awful memories and cause the boy to panic, which he'll have to wait for him to tell for now. Of course, he'll ask once he gains one of those nightmares again. He sensed that those nightmares are also connected to that sadness and guilt in his eyes. Urokodaki was currently sweeping the front of his home, whilst the food he was cooking was currently boiling, ready to be eaten, once Hanagaki comes back from one of his part-time jobs. The boy was already 1 to 2.5 weeks in his stay with him and finds his company quite enjoyable. He hasn't felt this comfortable after their departure. He was just about finished with his sweeping when he caught a glimpse of the boy coming towards him. He waved in response, welcoming the boy home. "Welcome home, Hanagaki. How did it go today?" he asks, placing his broom on the side. Hanagaki seemed to flinch a little before responding, It went well today. I earned a few yen for us. Enough to last us a few weeks to buy meat and other stuff. He nervously laughed, which caught Urokodaki's attention. Before he could ask what's wrong, Hanagaki immediately rushes in. Oh, you already made dinner. What great timing. I'll set up the table now. He rushes quickly to put his stuff away and readies for the night. Urokodaki senses something was up, but it wasn't anything bad, but something that he's nervous to ask him about, or nervous about something, 'cause he seemed to flinch at his presence now, which was unusual since he didn't do that for the past few days. Unless... Urokodaki dismisses it quickly, thinking it probably wasn't what he was thinking. Once he snapped out of his thoughts, he also helps the boy set up for dinner and readied for the night. The dinner was quite awkward and silent. Neither the two spoke up, nor did Hanagaki tell anything of his day at his part-time job, and it was about to get really heavy that Urokodaki could probably cut it with a knife soon. He places his chopsticks down and faces the child. Enough of the silence. Hanagaki, is there something? Urokodaki-san, can I ask you something? Hanagaki cuts him off first. He immediately silences himself at the gaze the boy was bearing in his expression, like he wants to know something that was kept from him, and he was slightly concerned and mad about it. It really was that, huh? Of course, is there something you wish to know? Urokodaki asks firmly, ready to answer the question he already knows what about. Hanagaki hesitates a little, rather worried at what he just learned from the residents in town. He looks back at him with confidence this time. I was going around town today, and doing the usual routine of working at different stores, he narrates quietly, but not too quiet. Urokodaki affirms. And I heard a rather interesting fact about you, something the townsfolk knows about you that I don't, his face shadowing slightly. And, he urges. Urokodaki-san. Hanagaki pauses, his eyes stealing with conviction. What do you exactly do for a living, Urokodaki-san? It has finally come. What do you exactly do for a living, Urokodaki-san? He knew one day the boy would ask, but he never expected it to be this soon. Well, he can't exactly avoid it now. He'll just have to further explain to the boy, in hopes he understands and believes him. And what do you think I do for a living, Hanagaki? He tilts his head. Hanagaki gulps quietly, before sighing and responding, I heard from the residents around here, and a few questions here and there, that you, he pauses, looks firmly at him before continuing, work as a demon slayer, Urokodaki-san. And with that, the room, despite being lit with fire to protect them from the cold, had darkened the mood and made it even icy cold. Urokodaki only looks down and places the chopsticks down on top of the bowl and sighed. Yes, I work as demon slayer, Hanagaki. He looks up. To his surprise, Hanagaki looks rather calm at this odd statement, like he wishes to know more of his work, and in his eyes, there is no sign of doubt or skepticism about the mention of being a demon slayer. To be more specific, I work as a trainer. Trainer? Hanagaki repeats and tilts his head. Yes, I train youngsters to become demon slayers, Urokodaki explains. Throughout the night, Urokodaki explains the purpose of the Demon Slayer Corps, the functions, hierarchy of ranks, that the Demon Slayer Corps is a self-secret government of society, a functioning organization without the interference of the government unless it involves the safety of the citizens and the existence of demons. Demons are supernatural creatures. They consume human flesh to gain strength and power. Urokodaki adds, the more they eat us, the stronger they get, and they multiply in terms of getting exposed to strong demon blood. And if they get too strong, it could very well be the end of humanity if they do succeed in reigning the world. He looks down, trying to get the boy to empathize with the information given, since the existence of demons sounds so far-fetched and impossible that it could very well be a laughing matter or joke that they don't exist, a tall tale to scare little children to not stay out late. I know it sounds impossible because they seem to be the kind that isn't a true being but a fictional existence, but I assure you that they... I believe you, Urokodaki-san. Huh? Urokodaki looks back at the boy. To his astonishment, there is no trace of doubt at all within his eyes, like he is used to this kind of story. You believe me? Urokodaki asks, confused and relieved slightly. Yes, I do. You claim that they sound so out of human nature, and are considered supernatural. But the truth is, Hanagaki looks away, scratching the back of his head, not once looking at him in the eyes. I also experienced something similar, he adds. Something similar? Urokodaki was the one next confused at what he meant. Why, yeah, I experienced something similar to supernatural demons, an existence that sounds so far-fetched and out of this world. He looks back this time, firm and believing shining within his eyes, no signs of disbelief. So if something that I experience as supernatural exists, then I do not doubt that demons also exist. So you don't have to worry about me not believing you, Urokodaki-san, he confirms for him. It was not visible for the boy, but Urokodaki was smiling, thankful the boy believes him, as not many believe people like him right off the bat. But something does grow in him. Suspicion and curiosity. He mentioned experiencing something similar, so he wonders. What sort of supernatural was the boy referring to that made the boy believe him so quickly? Well, he won't ask. For now, it could very well be a sensitive topic. So the two just further talked the night, Hanagaki being enthusiastic as to hearing all the missions and experiences he made whilst being still a demon slayer in his prime. After that long talk, the two promptly headed to bed, relief radiating off of him, finally no longer hiding the secret from the boy no longer, and slept soundly. Unknown to him, Hanagaki was assessing a certain decision he had implanted in his mind, regarding the topic of demons and the Demon Slayer Corps, that he barely slept that night. The next day went the same as usual. They woke up, eat breakfast, and Hanagaki would promptly leave home to work at one of his part-time jobs and come back home later in the evening and so forth. But somehow, when the boy woke up this morning, he seemed to have spaced out once in a while, like he was stuck in whatever is running through his mind, unsure and uncertain, that it grew concerned within Urokodaki. He hopes it didn't relate to the topic of his former work as a demon slayer. The fact he hopes he's not uncomfortable after knowing the truth. Time skipped to the late evening. Urokodaki was just cooking dinner inside when the doors of his home opened, indicating the boy has returned from his work. He stops momentarily to welcome the child home. "Welcome back. How was it today?" he asks. "It went well today, but, Hanagaki hesitates as he closes the doors behind him. Standing in front of the door entrance, Urokodaki-san, "Could I talk to you for a moment?" he requests, clear determination laced in his voice. Urokodaki blinks slowly at this, somehow shocked. Going by the tone of his voice, it's something he's seriously thought deeply about. And with that, Urokodaki lowers the fire of the food and promptly sits on the dining table. Across from him is the boy. Once Urokodaki sat down, Hanagaki spoke of something he wished he didn't hear. "Please train me to be a demon slayer, Urokodaki-san." To say the least, Urokodaki nearly fell from his chair at the request. He snaps his head back towards the child so quickly, unbelieving of what he heard. He sits back at the chair, adjusting himself, feeling slightly uncomfortable. He fake coughs. And is there a reason why you want to be demon slayer, Hanagaki?" His tone sounded angry, concerned, and worried. Hanagaki flinched in surprise at the tone he was using upon hearing such a request. Like he was hesitant on training him. Takemichi only fists his hands tightly on the table, not looking at Urokodaki, and then he releases a sigh. I want to find my reason again," he replies. Urokodaki, befuddled at that statement, asks further what he meant, to which Hanagaki only tightens the grip of his hands. "When I told you I ran away from home, I had also lost my reason. I was going through something rather large. During the time I spent there, I slowly forgot about the reason why I did the thing I did. And since I also lost the reason, I ran away so I could remember once more the purpose and reason of what I did," he finishes. He looks back at Urokodaki with renewed expression, like he was determined at his decision. "And upon hearing your line of work and the work of a demon slayer, saving humans from demons, I suddenly felt renewed at this information given to me. And with that, I decided," he adds firmly. "And that is?" Urokodaki further implies for him to continue. Hanagaki straightens his back and replies, "I want to become a demon slayer and see if I can find my reason once more if I do become a demon slayer," he replies firmly and determined. He stands up and immediately bows down at Urokodaki. "Please, Urokodaki-san, I want you to train me. I have a feeling if I do become a demon slayer, I would finally remember my reason, my purpose, so I beg of you, please train me," he begs, his shoulders shaking. Feeling rather relieved, he finally spoke it out loud. Urokodaki was mighty confused as to why he was so adamant on being a demon slayer, but if he had to refer to the sound of his voice sounding so desperate and determined at finding whatever this reason he's referring to, then he's dead serious on being one. And if he was any of the students he had trained before, this sound of being this determined, he really wishes to become a demon slayer. to find his purpose and reason once again if he becomes a demon slayer. Urokodaki ponders a little, and with a sigh, he turns towards the boy and pats his shoulder. The boy seems rather strong on his resolve on becoming a demon slayer, no hesitance nor deception, just plain determination, and strong will to find his reason again by becoming a demon slayer. I see you found your resolve, Hanagaki, he replies. Whatever this reason and purpose you are trying to remember, I will be happy to train you to find them. Hanagaki immediately stands back straight, tears forming slightly in his eyes, filled with grateful glee that his eyes seem to shine much brighter now. However, Urokodaki pauses, which slouches Hanagaki at the pause. If I do train you, Hanagaki, I would like something in return, he requests, to which Hanagaki nods in reply. Once you do become a demon slayer and find your reason once more, you must tell me everything. Hanagaki tilts at the vague question, everything, to who you were once before, your life, and whatever you're hiding from me as well. Do we have a deal? Urokodaki strongly asks. Hanagaki seems to hesitate slightly, but it quickly dissipates and he nods, confirming his part that he will tell everything. I will. And with that, this starts the first of Hanagaki's first step to becoming a demon slayer. The next day, Hanagaki went back to work for the final time, as he would quit working and train under Urokodaki for a good while. The other stores he worked part-time in understood his excuse and lets him go, with a bit of extra money as compensation for being so helpful, working every day and night just to accommodate his life with the Urokodaki-san. And with that, Hanagaki rushes back to the mountain to have his first train regime and routine started. When he had arrived, Urokodaki had already prepared himself, as he ordered him to follow him up the mountain, to which he complied, no questions asked. Whilst they went up, Hanagaki felt something rather eerie as they ascended the mountain, the place covered in with fog, and the mountain started to get darker, not only because it was starting to become nighttime, but the fact the atmosphere was very eerie and strange. Not only that, he was starting to wheeze a little ragged, and he was feeling rather nauseous and dizzy too as slowly as he ascended the mountain. Suddenly, Urokodaki stops slightly a few feet from him. He turns around slightly at Hanagaki, his posture rather tense. He was ready to do anything he was about to do or ask him of. From here on out, go back down to the house at the foot of the mountain, he orders him. He faces him properly this time with a soft shift of his foot on the ground. To see if you are as determined to find your reason by becoming a demon slayer, reach home before daybreak, succeed, and I will consider training you then. With that, the fog suddenly consumed him and vanished along with it, and shock would be an understatement for Hanagaki's reaction. But right now, he can't be at all. He has to prove himself. He should be demon slayer. He'll become a demon slayer and find his reason again. He started his stance, rushed down the mountain, but before he could even move a few meters, he stumbled on something, causing him to nearly trip and fall. Something was there, and he tried to look around if it triggered something, because if it did, he sensed something hurling towards him. Several rocks hit him in the face, causing him to stumble back, and suddenly, he falls, and he tumbles down a hole that was covered with branches and leaves, camouflaging the ground of its true form. He was right. This place is covered with traps everywhere. And if it's covered from head to toe of traps, there is a big chance he'll never make it down by daybreak. What's more, wheeze, wheeze, wheeze. The air here is incredibly thin, much more so that it was the very reason why he's wheezing so bad and causing him to feel dizzy. He doesn't want to fail. If he was known for something, is that he was incredibly stubborn, even in the face of death, and even when he was told to give up or stop, he won't. He really wants to find his purpose again, and he'll take as many of these traps if it means he can become a demon slayer. He's taken punches, gunshots, and such. How could traps be any different? He charges up again and rushes down, and he heightens his senses to the roof this time. During the time he's spent with delinquents, the gang, fights, and such, he's grown accustomed to sensing danger from a mile away, sensing if he would get hurt, sensing if something bad was about to happen. And with that experience, he uses it to his full advantage and dives down. He rushes down at the best speed he can, avoiding incoming logs swinging his way, rocks hurled and bamboos smashing him to the ground. Keyword, tries. He continues running down, repeating in his mind to numb the pain, to continue running and never look back, sense everything around him, trust his instincts like he never trusted them before. He'll become a demon slayer no matter what, and once he does, he'll find his reason again. For the future, he wishes to achieve, for his friends, everyone. For himself. Urokodaki continues to set up some first aid kits and food in case he arrives. He honestly doesn't plan to train him and make him a demon slayer, but the fact the boy is so hellbent on finding his purpose again by being a demon slayer, he couldn't say no, and the fact he feels like this boy would be too stubborn to not get trained is something he knows all too well. His first students and the ones that follow were like that too. He reminisces about the old times. He looks outside his window to see that the sun was nearly up. He was about to collect the boy to see if he had passed out while descending the mountain, when suddenly the door slides open with such force, revealing a very beaten and bloody Hanagaki, wheezing and inhaling too much breath, evident exhaustion in his face, but somehow he looks thankful and happy as the sun rose behind him. Despite the beaten and bruised self, he looked rather ethereal with the sun emanating from behind him, his ocean blue eyes shining with much vibrant color this time, clear of determination, exhaustion, and glee. Have I, wheeze, P passed yet? He stutters in his question, before promptly passing out on the front door, exhaustion finally entering him and causing him to pass out. Urokodaki quickly approaches the boy and carries him promptly to bed. He's just as determined and stubborn as all of his students. To which, he wipes the soot off the child's face and smiles behind the mask. I'll accept you as a student, and I hope you find your purpose as well. The following day, Urokodaki took Hanagaki to another part of the forest, where bamboo was seen present around them, and a small clearing. Urokodaki stood in front of Takemichi, his back facing him, as he further explains the Demon Slayer Corps. As I had previously said, the Demon Slayer Corps is an organization that deals with the extermination of roaming demons of the planet. The Corps has around several hundred members. He pauses as he shifts slightly to look above the bamboo forest surrounding them. A flock of birds passes by them from above. It's an organization that was once unrecognized by the government, but now it has its own independent rights of being an individual government, untouched and unbothered by society and the government itself. He turns to Hanagaki, the ground shuffling as he faces him, unless it involves the safety of the public massively. Hanagaki let out a small awe expression, amazed at the Corps' achievement to be an individual government. So the government cannot meddle with the Demon Slayer Corps, as long as it does not involve the public's safety? Hanagaki asks, his head tilting slightly. Yes, it was recognized as such after it was found out that the Corps has been around since ancient times. Until this day, we continue to hunt down demons unbothered. He pauses. Urokodaki shifts his head slightly downward as he places his hand on his chin as if trying to recall something. Well, as for those who lead the Demon Slayer Corps, they remain a mystery each and every era. He deepens his voice before trailing off of his thoughts. Hanagaki is tense at the last part somehow that it has the odd feeling of being intimidated by these mysterious leaders despite not having to see them yet. Demons. Urokodaki starts again. Their most staple food are humans. His voice sounds so angered and disgusted his gruff voice as he explains, no one knows where and when they first appeared. Their physical prowess is quite to be revered, wounds healing in a blink of an eye, flesh being restored when hacked off, and limbs can be newly regenerated. Somehow, despite being told as demons are the enemy of humanity and the Corps, he's somehow impressed with the capabilities of these demons. Sounding like it came out of a fantasy movie or anime right about now. Some demons can also shift their forms and gain supernatural and otherworldly powers, and these beings can only be killed either by sunlight or by decapitation with a special blade, he explains tightly. Of course, demon slayers battle these creatures with their mortal bodies, but despite that, they still fight them to protect humanity, despite his gruff voice. His voice softened at the last part. He turns his attention swiftly back to Hanagaki, who tenses quickly at the attention. As I had previously said, I am a trainer. I train youngsters such as yourself to become swordsmen, and trainers such as myself have their own pupils to train, and their own regimen in their location. He walks towards Hanagaki as he explains. To join the Demon Slayer Corps, you must survive the final selection process held on Mount Fujikasen. Whether you're eligible to go, he stops in front of Hanagaki, who does not back away from his presence as his shadow looms over him, will be up to me, he ends. For Hanagaki's first few days, he was told to descend the mountain as many times as he must, until Urokodaki tells him to stop. He continues to rush down the mountain like every other day, coming down on his second day. He's about near the middle of getting down, when a log swings towards him from the side, and Hanagaki barely dodges at the speed the log was heading towards him. After going down the mountain day after day, he quickly learns and picks up the path and way to avoid the traps, and he was getting better at discerning dangers that might come his way, like the one time he was nearing a certain part of the forest when the surrounding felt rather dangerous, and he quickly realizes what sort of danger approaches him as he jumps and ducks 3 swinging logs, hops off 2 pitfalls and 5 bamboo snare traps, hidden within the leaves as it bounces up and down to hit Hanagaki while he zooms past them. He was doing so well, both in getting down the mountain, discerning where danger might head towards him from, his agility increasing, as well as his stamina and strength as weeks go by. And yet, Hanagaki suddenly skids to a quick and sudden stop as he felt his danger senses going through the roof, as he turns to his left. Thud. 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 His entire body freezes as 3 knives pierce the wood he was leaning on, nearly hitting him. One was near his face, one near his right hand, and one was, well, nearly at his most sensitive part. The traps were getting more and more difficult each day that he couldn't even tell if he was trying to train him anymore or straight up trying to kill him. I can't time travel at this point, so if I die now then I will really have no chance of becoming a demon slayer, he internally screamed to himself. He looks up with tears in his eyes as he dodges another set of knives. Urokodaki-san, he internally screamed in his mind as he rushes down the mountain. For the next few weeks, he was tasked this time to run down the mountain with a sword in hand. It felt odd when he was first given it to him. When he touched one of Urokodaki-san's pre-made training swords, he suddenly felt nostalgic at it. Like something about the sword being in his grasp felt so right and it brought him safety and security. He immediately concludes that it was just his imagination. When he continued to run down the mountain with a sword, he found himself rather good at it. Sure, he gets snared once, maybe a few times while running with it. But somehow, despite holding a sword for the first time while running down, he rarely gets snared. He only gets snared or caught in traps when he doesn't focus. Other than that, he improved rather quickly in running down the mountain with a sword in hand. How odd. During his time in the mountains, he also made a routine to swing the sword once he gets down and count it to 100, no, 1,000 times as he must. Well, there are times when Urokodaki-sen comes in to bring more difficulty and claims, "Do another 500. Hanagaki nearly fainted at just the words on his 5th swing routine and remained frozen solid like a stone at the first time Urokodaki increased the difficulty. Swords break easily, he once told Hanagaki, as they were in the bamboo part of the forest again. That the sword was string vertically, but not so much horizontally, so the blade must be applied with a strong straight force along the blade. He also said to him, claiming that the blade's direction and the direction in which you apply the force must be uniform in use. He also added that if I break the sword whilst training with it, he'll break my bones exactly how I damaged the sword, in a very threatening voice, might I add. The next few weeks again, I was told to unsheath the sword. I faced Urokodaki-san with the blade out, ready for anything that is until my vision turned and I suddenly felt myself on the ground. During those times, he taught and trained me on how to break my fall and get back up at any position available. I would train by charging at Urokodaki-san with the sword, filled with intent not entirely on killing him with it, but each time I do, he quickly charges at me and flings me anywhere that I would usually roll on the ground, get myself dirty, and have to get back up quickly, which was a slightly bit challenging. Not so much as I thought since I picked up on being in Mikey's gang and going around saving their asses to always get back up no matter what. The least to say, I have 2 things I'm glad about that day. One was that I was thankful for being part of the gang and gaining some combat experience. 2, I was thankful for my tendency to get into trouble that my capability to sense danger heightened, especially now during my training. In the next weeks again, I was about to be trained for something I never heard of. Breathing techniques? I asked, befuddled at such a statement. Yes, that's right. Breathing techniques are used to aid demon slayers in demon slaying. There are many kinds of breathing techniques, but the one I will be teaching you today is called water breathing, he explains. Water breathing, huh? Kinda matches him and his attire of water pattern Haori. Remember to take a long breath so the oxygen flows to every part of your body. This also enhances your healing power and can also stabilize and energize your spirit. Huh. Kinda like getting high on drugs, huh? He said out loud. He quickly covers his mouth, to only be followed by a smack in the head. Focus, he ordered. Hanagaki immediately stands straight, readying to learn the said called water breathing. Relax your upper body, he explains, as Hanagaki does so, while bracing your lower half, and that he did, which brought him to a nostalgic moment when Kisaki told him to either brace himself for getting punched in the face or stomach. Then breathe. Hanagaki did as told as he took a deep breath. Wait, why do I feel like something's wrong? Smack. He suddenly yelps in pain as Urokodaki smacks his stomach with his palm, and he immediately coils himself into a ball at the sudden pain. Wrong, he yells back. Now the forms, he quickly changes the topic. To which, he tried to pose odd postures that he thinks he was also doing wrong, which earned him several smacks on the stomach again. Angered, he didn't brace his stomach. Kisaki, when I get back, I'll quickly thank you for teaching me to always brace myself, be it the face or my stomach, he thought internally. Somewhere in Shibuya, Kisaki suddenly sneezed during his study sessions with the Mizo mid-boys and Hina. Kisaki-kun, did you catch a cold? Hina asks worryingly. No, I didn't. I just feel like someone's talking about me right now. The next day, Urokodaki-sen brought me to a farther location from the house, which, the place was a location of a huge waterfall, and it looked majestic. I only took a bit step forward the edge to admire the beauty of it until become one with water and learn to become one. Hanagaki slowly turned back to look at him, pale in the face. What? And before he knew it, he was pushed from the ledge and immediately dropped to the water stream down below, splatting straight at the water, its sting as he splats on top, before getting drifted away. After recovering from that, he immediately went under the waterfall and sat there as the water drops on him continuously like large, heavy rocks, which was extremely painful compared to the time he took the hit on the head with the bat for Emma and the truck from Kisaki. Several weeks have passed, and Urokodaki-san had been teaching me about water breathing for a long time, and yet somehow I couldn't get to do what he intended for me to do. He tried to demonstrate what the forms would look like to see if I needed just a bit of imagery on how it would go, but unfortunately, I couldn't get to do any of the forms, not even the first. Urokodaki-san wasn't disappointed, which made me relieved, but he was curious as to why it won't work, to which I decided to just train harder in order to perform the forms. Suddenly, when Hanagaki finally descended another mountain for his training, he met up with Urokodaki-san readying to leave. Urokodaki-san, where are you going? He asks, as he places the training sword at the side, grabbing a small towel and wiping his sweat. My old student sent me a message and he seems to be bringing something for me, he explains as he wraps a cover around his head and tightens the string holding his Haori. Your old student? You mean Jiyu Tomioka, right? The one you mentioned before? Hanagaki recalls the time he was listening to one of Urokodaki-san's stories, and one of them was teaching his old student named Jiyu Tomioka. Yes, it is him, he confirms, as he slips into his shoes and adjusts them to his comfortability. Then, what was he sending you that you have to leave? He asks. He stands at the entranceway of the house as he looks at him in worry. He seems to be sending two individuals, the same age as you. One of them also wishes to be a demon slayer, he explains as he stops for a moment to tell Hanagaki. Another student, that's great. He could finally talk to someone who wishes to become a demon slayer like him, he thought to himself. He was feeling anxiously giddy, but it dissipated rather quickly, sensing the mood hovering over Urokodaki. But something seems to bother you about that. Why is that? Hanagaki asks, concerned for his teacher. That is until the next few words suddenly surprise him as well. That's because the two individuals he's sending towards me has a demon accompanying him. The demon? Hanagaki repeats in a stuttering voice. Urokodaki only nods in response, but somehow he also seems rather hesitant at going, but at the same, it was curious. Why would Urokodaki-san's old student be sending him someone who's being accompanied by a demon when he's supposed to kill demons? I'll be gone for a while. You can eat dinner without me. I'll be retrieving the child and the demon, so don't wait for me," he softly tells him before he sprints away, his figure getting smaller and smaller from his point of view. Hanagaki then proceeds to resume what he needs to do within the house, to which he passed by a letter placed on the table, curiosity getting the best of him. He takes the piece of paper and read the written message, assuming this is the letter sent to him by his old student. "Forgive my abruptness, Mr. Sakanji Urokodaki. I'm sending a boy your way who wants to be a demon slayer swordsman. He was brazen enough to attach me unarmed. His family was slaughtered by a demon." "A demon?" Hanagaki repeated the part, his brows furrowing at the information. "And the surviving younger sister has become one, but I have determined that she will not attack humans." "So they're siblings, one is still human and the other is a demon, huh?" He found it rather interesting to hear that a demon is being so cooperative and refusing to eat nor attack humans. Maybe the younger sister has her emotions and memories remained when she transformed? I can sense something is different about these two. Like yourself, the boy seems to have a keen sense of smell. Perhaps he'll find a way to break through and become your heir apparent. So he and Urokodaki-san are alike in having a keen sense of smell, he mused to himself. He did find Urokodaki-san to be rather odd. There are times he'd tell him he could smell his tiredness, hesitance, and whatnot. Maybe he could smell emotions too, and now that got him curious and interested even more. "I am asking you to train him. I realize this is a self-serving request, but please forgive me. I hope that you will take good care of yourself in your endeavors, and to your other current pupil as well. Yours truly, Jiyu Tomioka." Once he finished, Hanagaki immediately places the letter in one of the drawers, mostly where Urokodaki keeps his paper and pen, which got him thinking. When did Urokodaki-san mention him in his letters to one of his students? Either way, it doesn't bother him. He grins at the gesture of his former student for even writing his greetings to him as well. Very polite, he may add, but he gets the feeling this guy has the sort of personality to be a bit distant and cold. The way he wrote the letter was rather formal and reserved. He readies himself for the night, prepares an extra futon for the upcoming guests. He even left some leftovers just in case the siblings are hungry. He was about to head to bed as the sun sets on the horizon when he heard a clear sound of running, one pair of running and jagged breath. Tanjiro raced after Urokodaki-san, his breath leaving him from running and chasing after him. They only halted when they reached a small house. Once they did, he also collapsed to his knees, hyperventilating from all the running whilst carrying a small basket behind him with a white cloth wrapped around it. "And now, have I," he inhales a rather rough breath of air, "passed the test," he ends with that whilst getting his breath collected again. The man took off the white piece of cloth covering his head as he opened the door. "The test starts now. We're going to climb the mountain," he tells him. Tanjiro let a rather pitiful flabbergasted sound at the revelation. "Bring your sister in. Hanagaki will take care of her for you while we go up the mountain." He gives a short explanation as he enters the place. Tanjiro followed shortly, confused as to who was Hanagaki before he was greeted with the sound of a cheerful greeting. "Welcome back, Urokodaki-san. Welcome to you too as well." He was greeted by a boy. He seems to be the same age as him. He has bleached blonde hair and a petite form, almost like a girl, but he knew better. Despite the petite look, he was very much toned. But what caught Tanjiro's attention the most was his eyes. Piercing, ocean blue eyes that captures the colors of both the sky and the sea altogether. It made a contrasting color as the orange shone brightly alongside his blue ones. It made him stare in awe. His eyes depict of pure innocence and kindness, courage and gentleness. But somehow, despite the beauty behind them, he finds them rather lost, sad, and confused, slightly dull in color. He also smelt of guilt, sadness, and so much more, but there is also a hint of determination within them. "Leave your sister to me. I'll watch over her while you and Urokodaki-san go up the mountains." He spoke to him so gently. He also smelled sincere, so he could trust the boy his sister. "I'm counting on you." He pauses, to which Hanagaki got the gist and smiled softly. "Takemichi, Hanagaki Takemichi is my name," he introduces. He bows after he places Nezuko on the small futon laid near enough to the fire. "Thank you Hanagaki-san. My name's Tanjiro, Kamado Tanjiro." he introduces himself this time, returning the gentle smile. He quickly follows Urokodaki-san up the mountains for his first test. And just like Hanagaki did, he was told to descend the mountain and make it back before the sunrise, and if he does, he'll accept him on becoming his student. With that, he disappears from the fog, and he was left on the mountain to contemplate what to do, which he followed through and descended the mountain. But just like Hanagaki did as well, he was ambushed by traps that were scattered across the entire mountain, and he was very much perplexed at the number of traps laid about. But if he wanted to become a demon slayer, he'd have to get down and reach the house before sunrise, and so he heightens his sense of smell to locate all the traps throughout the entire night. Hanagaki remains awake that night. He couldn't fall asleep, not because of the demon girl beside him, but the fact he was rather restless at the very fact of what was going on in his life. He stayed awake the entire night with Urokodaki-san. He concludes that Urokodaki-san gave the same test to Tanjiro in order to become his student. He doesn't know whether he'll make it or not, as Hanagaki barely made it when he took the test. But he had faith he will. If he was like any good older brother, he'd be here for his sister, who was sleeping so soundly with a bamboo muzzle on her mouth. Must be for precaution in case she bites anyone. When the Kamado siblings arrived, he found the girl to be behind the boy, inside a basket covered with a piece of white fabric, keeping her away from the rays of the sun. He was also wearing a green and black checkered jacket, and a simple black t-shirt, with a blue scarf around his neck, and a pair of Hanafuda earrings of a sunrise. Reminds him of a pair of Hanafuda earrings on a certain someone. When he brought out his sister, she was wearing a simple pink jacket with a red and white checkered design covering her entire jacket as a design, and a brown vest. She was also wearing a slightly darker brown long skirt, just reaching her knees, and a black socks. The two came rather beat up, like they encountered something on the way here, something rather rough. He knows when someone is badly beaten up. He's gone through the same thing before to know whether or not someone jumped on them, or they fell on the way here, and he was certain they were jumped. He looks at the girl a little more, astonished that this girl manages to suppress her hunger instincts. He looks back up to see Urokodaki-san watching the window, waiting for the sunrise, and waiting for him. He has around 5 minutes left before the sun rises, too. Just as Urokodaki was about to get up and pick up the boy if he ever fainted or collapsed somewhere, or trapped within the mountain, the door slides open, revealing a badly beat Tanjiro. Blood was streaming from the corner of his head. His clothes were torn from here or there, and he was covered in dirt and soot. "I have returned," is what he manages to say, before slumping down at the doorway entrance and passing out completely. How familiar, Hanagaki thought. Urokodaki immediately gets up to collect the boy from the doorway and places him on the futon, right after changing him in different clothes and getting him cleaned up. For now, he was then followed by Hanagaki patching and cleaning his wounds, scratches, and the streaming of blood from his forehead, which he also found that there seems to be a scar on it. You and Inupi-kun sure are alike in this part, he ponders to himself as he cleans the scarred part as well. Well, will you accept him then, Urokodaki-san? Hanagaki asks him as he tilts his head up to see Urokodaki staring down the two siblings. Somehow, even though he was wearing the mask, he could tell he was smiling. Yes, I do. I accept him as my student. The next day, the boy, Tanjiro, woke up from his sleep. Hanagaki was sweeping the front porch when he found him awake. "Oh, good morning, Kamado-san. How did you sleep?" he asks, placing the broom in the storage part of the house. "Better, thank you," he responds oh so kindly. He turns to his side to see his sister still sleeping soundly. He smiles gently at her, as a mother would at her own child, but he looks at her with sorry in his eyes. "Ahem, her name is?" Hanagaki tries to change the mood and asks for the girl's name instead of as the topic changer. Tanjiro looks back at Hanagaki as soon as Hanagaki sits in front of him. "Nezuko, Kamado Nezuko," he introduces. "What a lovely name," he tells back to him with sincerity. Throughout the entire conversation, the two talked about each other's lives minus for Michi's time-traveling ability, as he hasn't told Urokodaki-san either yet. Where Tanjiro lived in another part of the city, in Okutama, his family runs a bakery within his neighborhood. He has about 6 siblings, and his father passed away quite soon, and the family was having a small vacation within the mountains at the old house within the woods their family owns when Tanjiro was out to buy groceries, his family was found slaughtered. His siblings were killed, and his mother too, only leaving Nezuko alive and still breathing. He found her all bloody, hiding the younger sibling around her arms, protectingly, as if someone was there to murder his entire family in such a gruesome state. Hanagaki expresses his condolences, which Tanjiro only dismissed quickly. It wasn't his fault. Hanagaki may seem to be around 14 years old, but his mind was of a 26-year-old adult, so finding Tanjiro to go through such trauma at such a young age didn't sit well with him as he tried to soothe some comfort to him. He also explains that he was about to bring her sister to a doctor when she suddenly flailed and turned into a demon. She attacked, he said, but she immediately stopped as soon as she heard him beg and call out to her, which was followed by Tomioka-san coming from above to decapitate her. He also explained that he also fought him off from killing her sister and threw an axe at his face before blacking out. The next he knew was that her sister was muzzled with bamboo around her mouth as she laid beside him and was then sent off to Mount Sagiri to meet Urokodaki-san. Hanagaki also explained his side of the story, to the parts he came to his hometown to save his friends since he was part of a gang, to which he reassured him he already left and told him that he ran away from home because he was trying to remember his purpose again, the very reason why he wishes to be Demon Slayer. You must have it hard, Hanagaki-san. He sympathizes with him. You too, having to see your family slaughtered like that must be very traumatizing, he asks in worry for the boy. It was very, but I can't just stand there and wallow in sadness. I have to make it up for my only surviving sibling, and turn her back into a human again, he says in such fierce determination and resolution that he find him similar to Draken-kun. Guess we're the same then, he points out. Tanjiro only tilts his head in response. I've also seen deaths in my life, so I can understand how you must feel. He sympathizes with Tanjiro. The boy looks at him with sadness that someone was like him. Seeing the deaths of those they loved, he can only smile in sorrow at the thought. I'm sorry to hear that, Hanagaki-san. It's okay, it's all in the past now. Also, he turns around and gets up from his position. Call me Takemichi, that's how my friends call me. He corrects Tanjiro as he opens his hands to get him up. Okay then, he takes his hand and gets up, then call me Tanjiro from now on too, Takemichi. He smiles so brightly at him. Hanagaki nods back with a pleased hum and the two went towards the table to eat breakfast. The following weeks and months have passed. Tanjiro went through the same training and routine Hanagaki did. There were a few differences in their progress though. One was that he took slightly longer in descending the mountain, but he manages to avoid traps more efficiently than he did. He was also slightly hampered in the descending the mountain with the sword in hand, and so much more. During the times Tanjiro also trained, Hanagaki would also lend a hand in training, sparring from time to time when Tanjiro was given a sample training sword too. By the time he completed his fall training, he was now onto the same thing Hanagaki was stuck at, the water-breathing techniques training. He nearly hurt himself laughing when Tanjiro was pushed off the edge as well when they reached the fountain, which carmed him to be pushed to and train with him under the waterfall. Welp, no more laughing at someone's suffering again for a while. During those months, he also found that the girl, Nezuko, wasn't even waking up from her sleep, not even once. They called in for a doctor to see what was wrong, but they found nothing of sort as to why she wasn't waking up. He would find Tanjiro at times to always stroke his sister's forehead ever so gently, worried that she might not ever wake up at all, he told him once. Hanagaki tries to give hope to Tanjiro that she'll wake up soon, that he just had to believe in her for now and let her rest. And with that, the two would continue to train. Ugh, I've had it, Hanagaki screams in exasperation as he slumps down to the ground. What's wrong, Takemichi? He asks. Tanjiro stops the swinging of his sword and looks back at Hanagaki. I've been trying the waterfall training, the mountain descent and such, and yet, Hanagaki grabs a handful of his hair in frustration, I can't even do a single form of water breathing. He complains in the top of his lungs, resulting in birds scattering away from the sudden sound. I'm sure you'll get it soon, Takemichi. Tanjiro tries to cheer him up, going close to him and patting him on the back. It did not bring such comfort, but he appreciated the gesture. He grips the training sword in his hand and looks at it intensely, like he was getting mad at such an object for hindering his performance to do a breathing technique. Maybe there is something wrong with me, he tried to mumble it to himself. but it seemed Tanjiro heard it loud and clear. What? There is nothing wrong with you, Takemichi. I'm sure there is another way, but I assure you, it's not because there is something wrong with you. He tries to deny Hanagaki's theory, looking rather distressed at his friends losing hope. But why do you think I can't perform water breathing then? He asks Tanjiro sarcastically and mockingly. He doesn't mean to, but his frustrations were getting the better of him. Well, it's your desire, Hanagaki. The two turned to see who it was and to see that Urokodaki-san was within the bamboos, who seemed to be observing them for quite a while now. Urokodaki-san, the two called out in unison as Urokodaki moved toward them. The two immediately faces him properly. What do you mean, my desire, Urokodaki-san? Hanagaki asks. Breathing techniques aren't just used for slaying demons. He takes Hanagaki's hand, the one that was holding the sword. These techniques represent the user's desires and wishes within them, he explains. Desires and wishes? Tanjiro asks this time. Urokodaki nods in response. Like flames, they represent the desire of compassion, love, and empathy, the desire to be the symbolic flames of humanity, symbolizing hope and renewal, he explains. Like the wind, they represent the desire of might, strength, and freedom, the desire to be the strongest and the most formidable, symbolizing freedom and ambition. He stops his explanation and lets go of Hanagaki's hand. And like the water, they represent the desire of power, tranquility, grace, compassion, and undifferentiated, the desire to be the guiding waters for those who are lost and afraid, symbolizing serenity and grace. He steps back and looks back at the two. Tanjiro has the representation of these desires, but he looks at Tanjiro then to Hanagaki. If water breathing is not suited to you, it means you are more suited for another breathing. Child, he ends. Hanagaki's expression changed from disappointment to astonishment. Suited for another breathing, huh? Then how do we know what sort of breathing technique suits him, Urokodaki-san? Tanjiro asks, sheathing his blade back into the scabbard as he approaches Takemichi. Urokodaki ponders for a little before looking back at Hanagaki. What is it that you desire, Hanagaki? Urokodaki asks. What do I desire? He repeats. Urokodaki nods back in affirmation. Yes, in finding what technique suits you. You must know what it is you desire in order to know, he tells him with encouragement. Hanagaki thought deeply, furrowing within his mind at the answer, which only earned him a chuckle from Urokodaki. Well, it won't be that easy to figure out. Hanagaki, why don't we head back and you can think more deeply there, he suggests, earning an eager nod from the two as they followed him back home and had dinner. That very night, Hanagaki was very much preoccupied with his thoughts that he remained awake that night. He couldn't figure out what it is he really desired, but he did figure out one thing. Maybe what I desire would be something from the past, he thought to himself. He laid his back against the futon again, staring at the ceiling above, and closed his eyes, imagining all the memories he's made in the past. Well, he is in the past, but rather the past actions he's done here in the past. He recalls the times instead he saved Baji and Kazutora. He had a small kindling of desire to help them. But what sort was it back then? He then turns to another time when he saved Draken, the first person he ever saved. He had a desire to save him too at that time. It was so clear too, but what? He shifts to another memory when he saved Izana and Kakucho from getting shot and killed. He definitely knows he had a stronger feeling of desire at that time. It was at the tip of his tongue, but what was it? He was getting frustrated when he suddenly remembered a certain memory, a very memorable one he had, and it was when they celebrated New Year's Eve at the Shichigo-san festival. He wrote a certain wish he had on an anime at that time, and never got to hang it when they kept flinging the plaque in the air. He remembers what wrote there, and it dawned on him. I hope to become a hero who can save everyone. To be a hero, to be the light that everyone can look up to. Let light shine out the darkness. With sudden vigor, he immediately gets up from bed and heads outside for the rest of the night. The next morning, Tanjiro woke up early to the sound of a swinging sword, grunts and exclaims, sudden at the noise. He gets up and readies himself for whatever is out there, not before realizing Takemichi is not in bed. What's the matter? Urokodaki wakes up as well, sudden at the earliness of the boy. He gets up too. Urokodaki-san, Takemichi's not here and someone's outside, he explains. The two immediately get up and ready themselves to find Hanagaki and whoever is there outside exclaiming so loud and early. The moment Tanjiro opens the door, the two were surprised at the scenario they are witnessing. Hanagaki was on a stance unknown to the two, breathing in a different way than water breathing does, and Hikari no Kakyu. He's Ikai no Kata, using blinding strike, a different breathing technique. A sudden form of the slash produced from the blade. It was so bright that it was slightly hard to see. As it heads towards the tree it was aimed at and cut it half upon impact. Once it did hit, it brought out a flash of bright light upon impact as the tree slowly began falling to the ground. Urokodaki and Tanjiro were amazed at what they were seeing. Mostly Urokodaki. He did say Hanagaki might be capable of other breathing techniques, but he never expected he'd create one on his own. Takemichi, Tanjiro called out. Hanagaki flinches in surprise to see the two awake in such an early morning, where the sun was slowly rising already. Tanjiro, Urokodaki-san, what are you doing awake so early? Hanagaki didn't get to finish when he was suddenly loomed by the presence of a beaming sun. How did you do that? That was so amazing, Takemichi. He compliments him with such fierce admiration glimmering in his eyes. He became a little flustered. Oh, that he stammers on what to say, still flustered for being praised like this. I suddenly remembered last night something about my desire. He looks back at Urokodaki, and it dawned on me on what I wanted, what I desire, that I just felt like there is something I needed to perform right this instant. He pauses, looks at the blade he was holding and gazes at with soft resolution and determination. And before I knew it, I was doing a breathing technique I'm not entirely aware of and was performing it, he explains. He looks back again to Urokodaki with a glint in his eyes. This is what I desire, Urokodaki-san, to be the light for someone, anyone in need, he exclaims proudly. Tanjiro watches in admiration at his strong will and resolve, his eyes glimmering much brighter than before, happy for his friend to figure out what he wanted. Urokodaki walks toward Hanagaki, patted him on the shoulder, and smiles softly behind the mask. Well then, do you have any other forms of this breathing technique I should know of? He asks, curiosity laced in his tone, as well a certain pride and proud feeling was blossoming at his well-talented and skilled student. With that, the rest of the day was spent on helping Hanagaki on improving his breathing technique and his other forms. He sparred with Tanjiro to improve as well, adjusted the forms, which counted up to 10 forms, and was guided accordingly by Urokodaki on what he can improve on with the said technique. The light breathing technique represent the desire to guide, to be a source of solace and hope, the desire to be looked at with such hope that everything will be all right, symbolizing guidance and salvation for anyone swallowed by darkness. For the past few weeks, the two honed themselves to the fullest. They trained, sparred, and learned as much as they could. More hard work for Tanjiro so he could turn his sister back into a human again, and for Takemichi to find his purpose again. To Takemichi, he finds Tanjiro rather suited for swordsmanship than he originally thought. During their time training and sparring, he always finds Tanjiro quite an unpredictable character. He manages to think outside of the box to try and find a way to win their sparring matches. Sure, Takemichi may have improved on his danger sensing skills, but for Tanjiro, he can somehow tell his next move and use it to his advantage and try to make him lose. He doesn't know if it's because he has a great sense of smell or he just has a good amount of potential. Either way, he was extremely happy and proud of his friend and fellow pupil. And sad to say, there were so many times he had lost to him, counting 23 wins and 14 losses for Tanjiro, and 15 wins and 21 losses for Hanagaki. It kinda hurts his pride a little since he's the most experienced in combat. But he makes it up for some skills, especially after Hanagaki was helped by Urokodaki-san by honing and perfecting light breathing. Well, he tries, since most of the tips he gave to polish his breathing techniques were mostly that helped in water breathing. To Tanjiro, if he has to point out something about Takemichi, was that he was extremely well trained in hand-to-hand combat, better than Tanjiro. He does wonder how he learned to fight in hand-to-hand combat so well, but he just concludes it's from experience and training for so long before him. Other than that, he finds his incredibly perceptive. He could immediately tell where danger might strike him so quickly that he dodges quite well. He's quite proud to be friends with someone so capable that he sometimes asks Takemichi to teach him more in hand-to-hand combat. Not to mention, he was able to create a breathing technique of his own. He has a feeling creating their own techniques is a huge deal, so he's quite amazed and impressed by him. Though, when they usually spar against each other, when the times he lost against Tanjiro, he would always smell frustrated and disappointed, but it always quickly dissipate. It would always be followed by the smell of determination, perseverance, and intense resolve, so he tolerates the smell. It was quite the hectic 2 years, where Tanjiro finally learned water breathing efficiently, with heightened and trained senses, instincts, and decision-making, and Takemichi finally completed at the very least all 10 of his light breathing, with new skills acquired, and improved combat skills. Now he only needs to hone and polish his techniques to the fullest in his journey. Urokodaki once said that techniques get perfected and polished throughout their years and journey, so he'll very much learn more by becoming a demon slayer. It was well in their 2 years when suddenly Urokodaki-sen called them out. "I have nothing more to teach you two." Urokodaki-sen concludes all of a sudden. The two were momentarily stunned to their positions, unsure of what to do next now. Did the training final come to a close? Will they attend the final selection now? Like, what is going to happen next? The two were so unsure that they glanced at each other before looking back at Urokodaki-san with confused gazes. "The rest is up to you two now, whether or not you can improve to the next level," he said so in his gruff voice, but he sounded so uncertain, like he was hesitant at this moment. He shifts his posture slightly to turn somewhere, but before he did, he glances towards his back ever so slightly. "Come with me," he orders. He began walking at a steady pace where we can catch up to him. In our hands were the training blades, and in our expressions were images of exhaustion but slight vigor stirring within as he hurried our pace to catch up with Urokodaki-san. It was a day when snow had finally come pouring within the mountain, making it slightly colder. It didn't bother us as much as we looked around as to where we were going. The direction we were going through was undeniably different than the path towards the fountain, the training mountain, or the bamboo forest. Urokodaki-san suddenly stops. We halted together when he stops, and in front of us was an unbelievably large object, sitting in the middle of a small clearing in the woods. A large boulder, wrapped by a much larger and thicker rope, and pieces of zigzag paper hang loosely with the thick rope. "If you two can slice this boulder, I will let you enter the final selection." It took 2 seconds for the two to register what he just said. The two both glance at Urokodaki, then to the boulder, the same question in mind. Is a boulder something you can slice? With a sword even? Tanjiro grips his sword tightly. Takemichi realizes what he must be thinking. Something similar to him, he assumes. If we use our swords to slice it, there is a large chance the sword will snap into two. The two remain gazing at the stone, unsure of what to do, or what they should really do to slice the boulder in half. Before they knew it, Urokodaki had begun walking away from them, not a single word of advice or anything to tell the two. "Urokodaki-san, wait!" the two call out together in unison. But he didn't pause or halted and continued walking in deaf silence, as the only thing that was heard throughout that day was the small gusts of wind and crunching snow beneath their feet. Even the next few days, Urokodaki never taught the two of us anything. He did not even come to give pointers again on perfecting my forms, too. Tanjiro then unsheathed his sword and positioned himself on the other side of the boulder. I continued to observe first instead, to see whatever results may happen. He gazes intensely at the boulder, before lunging at it with a war cry and hitting it with a loud clang in response. He suddenly shivers in response too. He must have felt a tingly sensation the moment he struck the boulder, but it didn't leave a dent. Figures, it's a hard-ass boulder. There's no way we could slice a boulder that easily, Hanagaki concludes. "So, what do we do now?" he asks as he takes out his sword too. Maybe try to get a dent too with his new breathing technique. But the moment he struck it, he got the same results as Tanjiro, suddenly shivering in response to a searing, tingly sensation racked throughout his entire body. "We'll just have to train harder then," Tanjiro responds. Takemichi looks back at him, properly this time after he got over the tingly feeling out of his body. "Let's train harder. Maybe there is something we could do if we do all the training Urokodaki-san taught us," he gives his answer. Takemichi nods in response, as the two walked away from the boulder to train somewhere on their own respectively for now. Unknown to the two were two piercing gazes from within the woods that were observing them the moment they entered the clearing where the boulder was. The two practiced and trained all the things Urokodaki-san taught the two throughout the entire 2 years, from the simple holding of their breaths, flexibility, proper blade force, and everything they could do. But somehow, even throughout the next 6 months of their redoing the training, the two never got a single chance to slice the boulder. It was getting frustrating for the two. No matter how hard they trained and intensify their training regime, they never seemed to get to slice the boulder. It was well into the sunset that the two were panting from exhaustion. Hanagaki was leaning on the boulder and Tanjiro has his sword facing the boulder again. Then suddenly, he headbutts hit. He also learned that his head was hard as a rock when he accidentally threw his blade at his forehead and it bounced off, but nothing changed. Keep working, Tanjiro. You can do it. He tries to boost his morale on his own. Hanagaki can almost feel the frustration covering his entire being. It suddenly infects him too as he suddenly punched the boulder backward, frustrated as well. They can't give up. They've come so far now. It was well when Tanjiro hit his head for the second time on the boulder did they suddenly heard a response. Shut up. It startles the two immediately at the sudden annoyed call. Tanjiro immediately steps back to see who it was. Hanagaki swiftly gets up and readies his sword. And what the two saw was a boy, maybe the same age as them, wearing a white haori, green and yellow checkered shirt, and brown baggy pants. He was adorning a fox mask with a small scar on the right cheek of the fox mask. He can also see that his hair was in the color of peach orange. A familiar peach orange color. A man shouldn't whine. It's unseemly, he tells them. He glances back and forth at the two, observing them like a hawk, despite the mask. When did he show up? The two thought at the same time. Hanagaki can tell from Tanjiro's face and the twitch of his nose that he's trying to tell if he was dangerous. But as for him, he felt rather off, like something about him. Someone like him didn't feel right to be here. He felt a little off place. No matter how you two suffer, bear it in silence, he reprimands the two of them. If you're a man, he gets up from his sitting position on top of the boulder, towering the two slightly higher as a shadow forms at his presence due to the setting sun. He jumps in the air. If you're a man, he pauses his sentence mid-air, before suddenly lunging at Tanjiro with a wooden sword held in his right hand and striking it to Tanjiro, earning Tanjiro a pained grunt in response when he suddenly kicked him in the face. Tanjiro, he calls out. Hanagaki immediately rushes towards the peach-haired boy with the intent to try and harm him, which only earned him a swift sweep of the ground by his foot and was kicked in the stomach at the same time, hurling towards Tanjiro. Tanjiro was the first to get up, followed by Hanagaki, who clutches his stomach slightly at the pain of being kicked. Something he's supposed to be used to, but it's just been a while since he was last kicked in the stomach. Slow. Weak. Immature. He stares at the intensely, with the words of his choice, stinging the two in the heart for being called at such. They don't reprimand as he has a point of description towards them. That's not what you call a man, he tells the two off. What do you think you're doing? Tanjiro reprimands back at him, confusion laced in his tone, as well as alertness at the sudden appearance of the peach-haired boy. I'd like to know what you two think you're doing, replying in a disgusted and solemn fury kind of tone. What do you mean? Hanagaki readies his stance slightly, which was also faltering each conversation. We're training here. How long do you plan to keep your butt on the ground? He points out in a slightly aggressive tone, without even taking a stance like your friend here, he points at Takemichi. Tanjiro only glances back at Hanagaki for a second and Hanagaki, too, before looking back at the boy again and readies his sword as well, gripping it tightly, alongside Takemichi. Come on then, come at me, he taunts slightly, his left hand gesturing in a taunting way as well. Tanjiro and Hanagaki hesitate slightly, aware of something obvious. But you have a wooden sword, and I have a real sword, Tanjiro points out in reluctance. And there are two of us, and only you. It wouldn't be a fair fight if the two of us took you on together, Hanagaki chirps in with the same hesitance in his voice as he tells the peach-haired guy. The boy pauses slightly at the hand taunting them, before drawing it back to his side. Suddenly, he laughs. He laughs as if he had heard something rather amusing to him in a very long time. He laughs as if the gesture the two worrying for him was found rather amusing and laugh-worthy. Well, thank you for worrying about me. So, you two think you can actually injure me and beat me at this unbalanced battle. Before they knew it, he suddenly moved towards the two with such incredible speed that they were a second late in reacting to his actions. The two immediately form a sort of X formation of the blades in parrying the wooden sword aimed towards them by the peach-haired boy. They parry hard of their own strength, but despite there being 2 against 1, the boy was extremely powerful. Much so than the two combined that they were having a slightly difficult time fending the boy off. "Well, the two of you have absolutely nothing to worry about," he exclaims in exhilaration as he tries to push through the 2 of them. "I'm more powerful than you two, for I have sliced boulder myself before," loudly he points out. He sliced that boulder, the 2 thought in unison. The boy then suddenly leaped away from the 2, and as a result, the 2 staggered back slightly at the force as he twisted himself back behind them and positioned himself against the tree before giving himself a push to bring more powerful impact. He lunges at the 2, he aims at Tanjiro and fends his blade first, before and aiming for Hanagaki, doing the same and jumping off again, to suddenly leap around the ever so swiftly, faster than the 2 can comprehend around the trees, that they shift and turn around themselves to find where the boy would aim and land. Instantly, he appears behind the 2, and before they could retaliate. Thunk. Thunk. They were hit both in the head, and their bodies were now suddenly kissing the ground. They were both twitching in response to the sudden pain and sensation caused by the hit of the wooden sword. He wasn't lying when he was powerful, Hanagaki admits. He could tell, despite the fact he told them he sliced the boulder himself before, but the fact he seems much more flexible, agile, and stronger, maybe even more than Mikey or Draken would have. "You two learned nothing. You two haven't mastered anything," he passionately points out at the 2. "Particularly, the breathing technique Urokodaki-san taught you, total concentration breathing," he points out. The words didn't fully register in the 2's minds, but the one thing that did was the fact that this boy knew who Urokodaki-san was, and the breathing technique, too. The 2 struggle to get back up at the searing pain in their heads to face the boy more properly, now sitting on their butts again. "All you 2 did was memorize it as a fact," he points out. "Your bodies have no clue what it needs to do, nor did you stop to think of its real usage," as he points the wooden sword towards them again. "What the hell were you 2 doing for the whole 2 years training?" he questions in an angered tone, as Tanjiro and Takemichi get back up again, stand staggeringly ready before suddenly getting lunged back again by the boy. "Slam it into your flesh," he aggressively instructs them as he suddenly was moving a lot faster, exchanging blows on both of them as he took the 2 of them on with only a wooden sword. The rapid movements were extremely painful, but the moment they falter is when he'll hit the 2 of them again, but this time much more painful. "More," he cries out loudly as he swings his sword rapidly. "More," he adds again. "More." He adds again more deeply as he swings and parries the strikes and swings the 2 took together on him. "So that you'll never forget the secrets Urokodaki-san has taught the both of you." He swiftly parries Tanjiro farther, who suddenly shifts his attention swiftly back at Hanagaki with a lot more fierceness in his movements. He must have known he's quite adamant on some combat skills, therefore he's being more aggressive towards him. "Pound it into the marrow of your bones." He suddenly parries Hanagaki farther as well, then suddenly fending himself from Tanjiro's strike swiftly and in precise timing. "I'm trying, we're trying, with everything we've got every single day," Tanjiro replies back whilst fighting the boy as Hanagaki took the chance to strike behind him. He was pushed off again and was parried off by the boy again. "But we're not making any difference at all," Hanagaki yells loudly in response. "We just can't go any further." "Go further," he yells in fierce determination and booming loud voice. He lunges forward at the 2 of them together this time, as the 2 block him together again. "If you're a man," he pauses at the block and swiftly turns to aim for Tanjiro's hip. But before getting blocked off by Hanagaki at this, "If you 2 call yourself a man," he shakes off and backs away slightly when he pushes Hanagaki backward. Tanjiro appears behind and was suddenly kicked towards Hanagaki. There's no other way but to go forward. He lunges again at them at a ferocious and deadly speed. "Bring it on," he yells loudly. "Show me what you 2 are really capable of." Tanjiro then lunges as well as Hanagaki towards the boy, right before they could land at least a hit. He briskly turns to avoid Tanjiro's strike and struck upwards that it hit his chin, and followed swiftly. He turns to Hanagaki and lands a quick smack on the back of his head, causing the 2 to pass out. Before Hanagaki blacked out, The sound of footsteps was heard from his side. He shifts slightly to glimpse in the blur a small scarlet, floral patterned dress with a navy blue vest come in view. The last thing he heard was the boy speaking to the newcomer about leaving the rest to the said blurred person and passing out completely. A few hours have passed, and it was already nighttime. The two lay unconscious on the ground for a good several hours before slowly gaining consciousness again. They slowly look around the place for the peach-haired boy, only to see someone else. "Are you two all right?" A girl crouched down to reach the level the two were lying down. The two immediately gets up and looks towards the girl. She had black hair that reached her shoulders, a fox mask, much like the peach-haired boy earlier, only with flower patterns carved on it. She was wearing a scarlet dress with floral patterns and a navy blue vest and brown sandals. Her expression looked soft and serene with those dark cyan eyes of hers. Hanagaki was stunned to see such a cute girl that Tanjiro spoke first. "Did you see that just now?" he questions in haste. The girl only tilts her head in confusion. "What a strike that was!" He turns towards Hanagako. "Right, Takemichi?" Snapping out of his thoughts, Hanagaki can only nod quickly in response to Tanjiro's amazement at the peach-haired boy's skills. He was indeed impressed, and he probably could beat Mikey-kun if he ever encountered him in a fight. Yeah, not a single motion was wasted in his movements, Hanagaki complimented this time, awe and astonishment laced in his tone as well. "And it was quite beautiful," Tanjiro added. "I want to become like that." "You think me and Takemichi can become someone like that?" He expresses such excitement at the image of being someone like him. Hanagaki will admit that he does want to become someone like that too. Someone swift, agile, undaunted, and powerful. He'd very much like to be like that too. The girl only smiled back at such dedication. "I'm sure you two can, since I'll be looking after you too," she says, followed by a sweet, soft and small chuckle in the end. "How cute." "Who are you?" Tanjiro asks, with a small blush on his face. The girl's name was apparently Makomo. She also introduced the other, the one with peach-haired hair, as Sabito, and during that time, she began guiding us in our training, pointing out our defects and our flaws during training. She corrected Tanjiro's unnecessary movements and bad habits, as well as my stiff posture and stances and some other stuff I didn't realize I was doing. Some were even what I was doing wrong when handling my breathing technique. But when Tanjiro asked why she was doing that and where she came from, she didn't tell him anything. "Both he and I love Urokodaki-san very much." She expresses her compassion ever so softly. That was her pet phrase. She also told them that Sabito and her weren't siblings. She said the two were raised by Urokodaki-san after they were orphaned. "There are other children besides us." She pauses with a soft smile under the moonlight. "They are always watching you too. Tanjiro, Takemichi," she said with such fondness in her voice. To which the two conclude that Makomo was a strange girl. She speaks in such an abstract and dreamy way that it's sometimes hard to tell what she's referring to. "See, total concentration breathing accelerates your blood circulation and your heart rate." She spoke in a quiet and soft manner that it causes your body temperature to spike, making you as strong as demons whilst being human. She looks back at us with the same soft and sweet expression. "What's important is to expand your lung capacity," she explains. "When you bring lots of air into your blood, and when your blood gets excited, your bones and muscles scurry to heat up and grow stronger." Hanagaki looks back at Tanjiro, who was harboring a rather confused expression. "Not much into science, are you, Tanjiro?" Hanagaki laughs silently in his head. "How can we do that?" Tanjiro asks, overcoming his confusion in an instant. And with a small smile, she replies, "Train to death." She responds with such an unbothered expression after stating to train ourselves to the very death that it was actually terrifying to hear from someone who's smiling so kindly. Not like it was a problem for Hanagaki, since training to death was probably like saving his friends, even if death takes him. And with that, for the past few weeks again, until our legs and arms fall off, until our lungs and heart were about to burst, we swung our sword repeatedly, to death, as Makomo added. But even with that, we couldn't still land a hit on Sabito, not even once. Not until 5 months later, the two of us decided to take on him again. On a snowy night, Sabito was wielding a real sword, and Makomo was there too, wielding the same, as her fox mask was also hiding her face. Our hairs had grown longer that they reached our shoulders. Tanjiro's hair makes him look almost majestic, while mine started to fade its bleached blonde hair and was slowly turning back to its natural black color. Tanjiro took on Sabito, while I took one on Makomo. After 5 months, finally Sabito and Makomo unsheathed their swords, followed by us as well, unsheathing our swords. "You two both look like a proper man now," he says in a stern and soft voice. "Today's the day we win," Tanjiro and Hanagaki exclaim in unison. Deadly silence looms around the clearing as both sides remain still in their stances. From the far right of the Tanjiro versus Sabito, and on the left was Makomo versus me. Our stances remain vigilant of the opponent in front of us. Despite me taking on a girl, I knew she was someone I should be wary of. After all, she trained before me and Tanjiro, so she was most likely more skilled than I am. In headstrong battles, the one who's stronger and faster is the one who wins. We took a long breath, circulating it within our bodies and throughout our entire bodies, and in an instantaneous response, two sides charged at each other. And the battle was over in an instant. Ching. On this day, on this moment, for the first time, our blades reached the two of them first, cutting the mask both two were wearing. The moment the mask fell on their shoulders in two, the two adorned a small smile. The two looked sad and happy at the same time, a relieving kind of smile. "Tanjiro, Takemichi," Makomo calls out. Our attention falls back on Makomo. "You both did great. Don't forget what you just did," she spoke in soft-spoken glee, sounding proud and happy. "Win, okay, Tanjiro. Takemichi?" she asks as suddenly the fog consumed them and slowly disappears with it that we had to look away as the fog covers the two individuals. "And beat that guy, too." The two of us blink again, and the next we knew, Sabito and Makomo were gone. And our swords, which were supposed to have cut the masks of Sabito and Makomo, had sliced the boulder into 3 parts, one on the left and one on the right, leaving 3 pieces of the giant boulder. The two remain in awed silence at what they had just witnessed. Where Sabito and Makomo were, was then left with their swords down to the ground, and in front of them was a sliced boulder, cut into 3. It left them gaping at the sight of what they had just done. But where did Sabito and Makomo go? Weren't they just here in front of us? Hanagaki asked himself. He looked around to see if there is a trace of them leaving. But there was none, as if they just vanished along with the fog of this cold winter night. Out from the woods, Urokodaki slowly made his way towards the two, crunching sounds of the ground and snow following his wake. They immediately turn their attention back to Urokodaki, who also stops at the sliced boulder, not uttering a single word at the result. Urokodaki-san. Tanjiro calls out his name, slight exhaustion evident in his voice. Hanagaki makes way towards Tanjiro to stand beside him and look at Urokodaki as well. Urokodaki remains staring at the boulder, not uttering a single word towards the two. It grew a deafening silence, but not to the point it was uncomfortable or awkward, just silence. A few seconds passed later did Urokodaki finally spoke. "I had no intention of sending you two to the final selection." The two flinched slightly at that, feeling rather down by the statement. "I didn't want to see children die anymore," Urokodaki claims in a low growl, sounding so dejected at the claim. "I was sure you two wouldn't be able to slice this boulder, but..." He pauses. He turns around to face the two, and approached quietly. He follows by petting their heads in unison, ruffling them sideways, indicating he was proud at them. "Well done, you two," he exclaims. "Tanjiro, Takemichi, you two are quite the remarkable children," he praises the two, his hands remaining on top of their heads as he praises them. The two suddenly cried. Happiness flowed through their tears at the heartfelt praise from their teacher and master. They felt so full and happy that tears streamed down, unmoving as they just continued to cry in unison. Whimpers were softly heard. Urokodaki immediately hugged the two in an effort to comfort them at the overwhelming feeling they must be experiencing. "Make sure you come back alive from the final selection. You two. Your sister and I will be waiting for you to come back." He expresses his wish with sadness laced in his tone as he spoke in his gruff voice. Later, they returned back home. Food was boiling in the pot, and several skewered fish was set near the fire that was cooking the hot pot inside, and several ingredients were evident inside that Tanjiro and Hanagaki gasped in surprise at the amount. "What's the occasion? There's so much inside," he exclaims in glee. You two finally have completed your training, so we're celebrating, of course. He hands out the 2 bowls he filled and gave them to the 2 boys first. Don't be shy now, eat up, he encouraged. The 2 then immediately took their bowls and thanked him for the meal, followed by a prayer of thanks, and immediately gobbled the food, politely of course. Whilst they ate, the 2 shared conversations about the flavors they found rather delicious and appealing to them, exchanging opinions about their own favorite food as well from time to time. Urokodaki remains still, observing and watching the 2 with fondness. Tanjiro, Hanagaki, there is nothing more I can do for you two. From here on out, you'll be going through such hardship and strife. Your training will seem like nothing in comparison. So far now, at least, he observes the 2, who immediately laugh together at a certain part of their conversation, rather relaxed and happy at the meal the 2 are sharing. You two should rest well without a care in the world. Tanjiro finishes his bowl first before giving it back to Urokodaki in silent suggestion to have a second serving. Did Hanagaki pointed out another part in their conversation. By the way, Tanjiro, your hair looks rather majestic with the way it's a lot longer now. He points at Tanjiro's hair. It swayed backward when Tanjiro moved slightly again as he hands his second serving. Thank you, I appreciate the compliment, he replies back sincerely. He gobbles a portion of the food again and replied back in return, your hair seems to be also getting longer. You look rather prettier with it longer. Hanagaki takes a strand of his long and slightly fluffy hair, twirling it in response to the compliment. Thanks, a lot of people told me the same thing, that's funny. He reminisces at the times the others point out that Hanagaki looks rather pretty than handsome in his features. I also noticed that your hair is slightly changing in color. Tanjiro points at the top of his head with the chopsticks. It's slowly going from blonde to black now. Is black your natural hair color? He curiously asks. Urokodaki also pays attention to the hair color the boy was slowly adorning. The color of bleach blonde was slowly fading and was returning from its natural hair color of black from its roots on top of his head. Yeah, my hair is naturally black. I just dyed it blonde because I was once a delinquent from where I came from, he explains. Tanjiro formed an O expression at the information from his friend. He doesn't know much about Takemichi, but he was sure enough that whatever backstory he had, it wasn't easy nor light as one should expect from a teenager. That also reminds me, Tanjiro, Hanagaki, Urokodaki calls out. The 2 switch back their attention to Urokodaki, who was looking for something within the nearby drawer. Shuffling and loud thuds were heard as he continued to look for something. He then pulls out 3 neatly wrapped cloths and closes back the drawer. Returning to his sitting area, he hands out the objects to the 2. The cloth wrapped around the object felt smooth to the touch. The 2 remained to stare at the gift given to them. 1 was for Takemichi and 2 for Tanjiro. Go on, unwrap them, he gestures to the 2 to continue. Curious, the 2 immediately unwrap the cloth, its covering, slowly and neatly as possible, and once they do, they were greeted with 2 haoris. Tanjiro was gifted with a green and black checkered haori, while Takemichi was gifted a black haori, which had a blue gradient at the edge of it, and gold-colored cloud patterns at the edges of its sleeves and the draping sides. The 2 picked up the haori high above to observe the piece of fabric more closely, and it pleases them to see such fine pieces of clothing. They're beautiful, Urokodaki-san. Thank you, Hanagaki immediately expresses his thanks, followed by Tanjiro humming in response as he nods. You 2 can wear them once you return from the final selection, he declares. The 2 looked back at each other, grinning in response at the suggestion. They were sure gonna wear them once they've been fully accepted as a demon slayer. Takemichi momentarily observes his haori, somehow feeling nostalgic at the colors of gold. It reminded him of the gold color highlights of his old gang uniform and the symbol that remind Tokyo Manji gang. This brought him an idea. Urokodaki-sen, he calls out. Urokodaki and Tanjiro were slowly fixing up the used utensils and pot after dinner. Did Urokodaki look back at him? What is it? Hanagaki folds his haori gently before facing him properly. I hope you don't mind, but there is something I want to add to this haori, so I was wondering if I can go tomorrow to the town to buy an embroidery kit, he asks. Urokodaki doesn't really need to think twice and nods in response, giving Hanagaki permission to go to town too, but whatever he needs. Once the 3 were finished putting away and cleaning the used utensils and pots, They immediately ready their beddings. Tanjiro finished first and was checking on Nezuko again. Once he was done, he joined Hanagaki in cutting their hair to a much shorter length. Did Urokodaki called out to them. Hey, you two. The two stopped momentarily at what they were doing to turn their attention toward Urokodaki. Did you two enjoy that hot pot? He solemnly asks. Tanjiro replies with a hum and Hanagaki with a nod. Yes, we did. It was such a long time since we had a feast before, Tanjiro exclaims happily. Hanagaki only smiles brighter whilst he continues busying himself by cutting his hair with the scissors. Growing boys like you with a hearty appetite should get stronger as the more he eats, as well grow bigger in size. He heartily laughs while speaking, but of course, that goes for demons, too. His tone changes dejected and serious as he continues. The smile that adorned the two faded at the mention of demons and immediately became serious upon listening to Urokodaki. Remember this. Basically, a demon is as strong as the number of humans he's devoured, he comments in a serious and low tone. So, they get stronger the more they eat? Tanjiro asks. Hanagaki looks at Tanjiro before looking back to Urokodaki to listen for more. That's right. Urokodaki swiftly stands up, facing the two once more. There are demons who gain power, become able to transform their bodies, and even use strange spells, he adds. Strange spells, huh? Well, it's not a demon if it's not capable of something like supernatural powers, Hanagaki comments in his mind. Then his mind came to a screeching halt. Wait, if demons possess supernatural abilities, does that mean I'm one too? He screams in his mind, somehow now panicking over the fact that he missed what Urokodaki had said to them. Urokodaki then turns to an upper cabinet and slides it to the right, revealing two fox masks in his hands. He misses the few of the sentences he stated before only realizing that Urokodaki had handed the two of them each a fox mask. This is? Tanjiro asks as he holds the fox mask. Hanagaki also takes the other, snapping from his train of thought immediately to observe the mask given. It's called a warding mask, Urokodaki explains. I've charged it with a spell to protect you two from harm. The two remain still, admiring the well-decorated and carved masks on their hands. Tanjiro has a fox mask with red eyes and a small sun symbol on the right side of the mask, almost symbolizing Tanjiro, while Hanagaki had a fox mask with the same color of his eyes on it, blue like the ocean, with a star symbol in the middle of its eyes, in the color of yellow. The next day, the two woke up in the near afternoon time, readying to depart for Mount Fujikasen, where the final selection takes place for all applying young demon slayers. Tanjiro and Hanagaki were preparing themselves, wearing the same blue ocean pattern haori with clouds on. Hanagaki then goes to the cabinet where the fox masks were placed and immediately takes out both his and Tanjiro's masks. Once he did, he placed his on the left side of his head and was about to give the other to Tanjiro, when he noticed him entering the same enclosed room his sister was still sleeping in. He walks towards the room to give the mask, only to find Tanjiro kneeling beside Nezuko. He was grasping her hand and placing it on his head. I'm coming back here no matter what, all right? He quietly reassures his sleeping sister. Hanagaki's heart clenched at the sight. He really does love and care for her, and he also prays that Tanjiro survives the final selection and comes back home to greet her again. Even better if she wakes up when the two come back together. Don't worry about me or your sister. I'll take care of her, Urokodaki reassures the two as they stand outside the house, heeding his words first before they depart. All right, thank you very much, Tanjiro exclaims with a bob of his head. The two begin to start their way, but Tanjiro turns for a moment and looks back slightly. We'll be going then, Urokodaki-san. He bids his goodbye and began running, catching up to Takemichi who was already a little far ahead. Urokodaki waves a small goodbye to the boy as he watches them slowly becoming smaller in his view. The moment Tanjiro was slightly out of sight did he turn around again and yelled back. Say hello to Sabito and Makomo for me, he exclaims and runs back to catch up with Hanagaki. If he had stayed looking back, he would have seen how Urokodaki tensed at the statement. Once Tanjiro had caught up with Hanagaki, the two began running together towards their destination. Curious, Hanagaki looks at Tanjiro with a question in mind. Hey, Tanjiro, what did you call out for Urokodaki-san at the last minute there? He asks while running down the mountain with him. his attention still looking forward. "Oh, I just asked him if he could say hi for me to Sabito and Makomo if he ever sees them," Tanjiro states so simply that Hanagaki immediately halts in running to stop him from running too. "You asked him to do that?" Hanagaki exclaims in an upset tone, rather shocked at what Tanjiro asked Urokodaki to do. "Yeah, I did. Why? Is there something wrong with that?" Tanjiro asks as he could smell Hanagaki rather distressed, restless, and shocked at him, like he was hoping he didn't ask that question at all. "And no, it's not that." Hanagaki stutters in response and continues running, followed by Tanjiro. "It's nothing, don't worry about it," he reassures him as the two kept going. Tanjiro ignores it for now, but he could tell Takemichi was lying about something, but for now, he'll have to focus on the exam. Unknown to Tanjiro, Hanagaki knew why he shouldn't have asked, as he began mulling over his thoughts of Urokodaki, thinking about why Tanjiro asked about the well-being of two dead children. Yes, he knew, right from the beginning. He knew when he met him and Makomo for the second time. Their auras felt rather off, as if they weren't a part of the forest, nor are they supposed to be there at all, like they were some sort of ghost. That's when it clicked, the two were already dead. Spirits who came to scold and trained the two to do better. He still hasn't figured out how the two interacted with them, physically, but he knows the two were already dead. It was well nighttime already when they arrived. The place was covered to the brim with several lavender-colored flowers, and they were quite beautiful and pleasing to the eyes. The flowers were draping off their branches that reaches them. If Hanagaki remembers correctly, they were called wisteria flowers. The two began climbing a series of several stairs, indicating that the selection must take place above. They slow and steadily made their way up, only to be halted at the sight. There were several other people at the place. They were all scattered about in other directions with scowls and frowns on their faces. Some were asleep, some were warily looking, and some were looking rather calm, maybe a little arrogant for the others. There were females too, which was a surprise. A lot were guys, but a few were girls. "There's so many," Tanjiro muttered softly that only Hanagaki could hear. "Yeah, guess there will be more than one participants this year," Hanagaki concludes. The two remain observing at the amount, 20, no, maybe around 30 of them within the area. A small clearing where they are surrounded with wisteria flowers. A few red pillars with banners streaming in different directions, and in front of them, slightly farther away, was another gateway similar to the one in front of them, except much smaller than the one in front, which a larger pair of red pillars with banners hanging on both of them. "Let's go in, shall we?" Tanjiro invites Hanagaki in, who was already stepping foot within the area. Hanagaki nods in response as he took a few steps forward when all of a sudden, his vision suddenly turned dark for a second. In his view, he could see the same area, but this time it was already set early morning, where the sun had finally risen enough for the demons to hide away again from the sun. But what shocks him at the said vision was that only 5 people remained. What is this? Is this one of my future visions again, like the one with Senju? He panics, asking himself as he continues to observe again. He swiftly tries counting again, and yes, he was correct. 5, including him, were only left standing in the area, all battered and injured. Well, the girl with the pink outfit was still clean, but besides the point. Everyone in this area is going to die tonight, he mentally concludes. That fear and worry struck him immediately as he suddenly felt shaking, which was then followed by someone calling out to him. "Takemichi, Takemichi." It was Tanjiro's voice, who sounded so worried as he shook him while calling out to him. Hanagaki immediately slaps himself mentally back to reality, only to discover himself on the ground, held in one arm by Tanjiro. Did he pass out? "They're all gonna die," he mumbles softly on his own. That Tanjiro picked up what he said. "Everyone's gonna die? What does he mean?" "Hey, are you okay?" Tanjiro immediately asks. Hanagaki looks around again for a moment and nods in response and gets up fast. "Hey, if you don't feel well, you can forfeit. For now, you look rather pale." "I'll still go, Tanjiro. I know you're worried, but I'm fine," Hanagaki replies sternly. Tanjiro jumped a bit slightly in response. He was worried for his friend's well-being, but if he says he's fine, then he'll trust him for now. Seeing his determined expression, he'll ignore what happened just now. As for Hanagaki, the reason for his determined face was that he was readying himself to find every single of them and try to save them as best as he could. He grips his sword tightly, As the two doll-looking girls introduced the beginning of the selection and the start of the exam, did Hanagaki firms his resolve and walked in with a question in mind. Why am I even bothering again? As soon as the exam had started, Hanagaki swiftly made his way around the mountain to try at least to locate one person who was taking the exam. If he starts with at least one person to save, he'll be able to save the next one he encounters, one person at a time. The vision he saw earlier at the entrance still rattles him to the core that the fact that only he and 4 other people survived was appalling to say the least. He was so lost in thought that he nearly failed to realize his surroundings were increasing in danger, that the moment he realized it, he encounters a demon. He jumps on Takemichi by surprise, but with quick thinking, he quickly draws his blade out, then rapidly turns away from the range of assault, bringing him to the right side of the demon when it came in impact with the ground, and without a second later, swiftly beheaded him immediately. He takes a moment to look back at the disintegrating demon, who was wailing and complaining about something having been able to come out finally of his imprisonment. Did he get killed immediately without at least devouring a single human, as he slowly disappears into thin air? The air remained heightened with a deadly atmosphere, so Hanagaki immediately made haste into finding more demons, even more so to find other people as well. Not a moment later, he encounters 2 demons. They both have morphed their bodies quite a lot, that they no longer look human anymore, as spikes protrude on their backs, while the other had developed an extremely disgusting and long tongue. His skin turned green with black charred eyes, both wearing tattered clothes. "This one's mine, get your own, bastard." The long-tongued demon hissed in response at the other demon, who was pulling on the demon slayer wrapped around his tongue. "I came here first. How about you fuck off instead?" The back-spiked demon growls back, who was pulling on the poor boy's arms, who seems to be in pain being pulled apart. "Filthy demons, neither one of you is gonna eat this poor boy tonight." Hanagaki immediately takes a breath, readies his pose, and with a quick movement, leaped from the ground and readies his aim at the 2 demons. Hikari no Kakyu. Shino Kata Sun Bend, Whip Slash. His blade shone in bright light, and it followed his movements in a fluid motion, as if the light become a string of bright light. Followed his movements, he bends and twirls around the demons, avoiding the poor boy as much as possible, and aimed at the necks of the demons. The 2 demons couldn't comprehend what had happened as they stopped their argument the moment they have blinded by some sort of light, and the moment their eyes had adjusted because of the light, their bodies had begun crumbling and disintegrating as a result. "What the hell? I've been killed?" the spiked demon exclaims in an angered and surprised tone. "Who? Where?" The tongue demon quickly looked around for the source, and to see the Hanagaki in his arms is the human they were arguing to eat, who he now placed on the ground and told him in a soft voice to run away and get to the other side quickly, who didn't have to listen twice and ran away in fright. You puny human. I was supposed to become a part of the 12 Kazuki, and you had to ruin it. Damn you," he cursed at him, as slowly as he crumbles away, leaving only the tongue demon's lower part of the head where the mouth was before it had completely disintegrated. The spiked demon was already gone. His threats and curses became deaf in Hanagaki's ears. He felt exhilarated. He was able to save someone. All the years he had trained at the mountains weren't wasted. He clenched his fist in victory at his first job well done in slaying a demon. But he can't stay here celebrating, as he needs to go save another before they do die out here. He quickly makes haste and runs again, and the demons he encounters were all the same as the first. Arrogant, hasty, abrupt, and selfish. He decimated them quickly as he tries to find someone else. He quickly encounters 2 more demon slayers as they were being chased by 3 demons. One of the demons had rocky and stiff hands that could very well smash anyone with those. The other had his hair flowing like living snakes as it tries to grab one of the slayers, and the third one had a very snake-like lower half, rapidly gaining on the 2 slayers. "Come back here, Tilda, I just want to eat you up, Tilda." The one with snake-like hair taunts at its hissing, as it snaps its hair at one of the slayers to try and grab them. The other giggles at the frightened and panicked look on the 2 slayers as they ran. He immediately decides to take on all 3, and with that, he readies a stance. Hikari no Kakyu. Go no Kata Hyperspeed Glare. With all of his oxygen focused on his legs, he burst in lightning speed as he zooms on the lined 3 demons, his body almost disappearing in a bright haze and slicing their heads in unison. The three demons, surprised as their heads began tumbling away from their bodies as it crumbles away. Hanagaki swishes his sword sideways to remove the residue of blood off his blade. He sighs and turns to the now relieved two demon slayers. "Are you two all right?" he asks with a tilt of his head. His eyes glimmer with worry and relief at the sight of them as they nod in response. To the two slayers, the moment the boy with black hair appeared with a bright light, the moon shone brighter in response to his breathing technique, and his image shone as if a bright haze surrounded his entire being, looking ethereal with light behind him. Almost like an angel with those bright blue ocean eyes. "You two should quickly make haste and get to the other side," Hanagaki told them as he readies himself to leave again. Until then, he ends with that, and swiftly runs away from the two in hopes they quickly leave and go to the other side again. The two slayers finally snap from their thoughts, gets up from the ground, and bow in the direction where Hanagaki ran off to and yelled, "Thank you for saving us," the two said in unison, hoping the black-haired pretty boy heard them and left immediately right after. The whole night, Hanagaki went around the entire mountain, trying to save as many of the demon slayers as he can. Once he would, they would then bow at him and thank him as he leave, or simply run away in fright. Maybe a bit of both, too. It wasn't until he encounters another demon. But this time, this demon looked entirely different than the others, as it was chasing a boy who was crying out loud that some demon like this shouldn't even exist or even be at the final selection. Hanagaki quickly hides behind a tree, and to his shock, the demon looked downright awful. The demon had several faces on his head on an egg-shaped head, and its body had several marks in cursive on them with 4 arms. It was floating as it chases the demon slayer. "No need to flee, for I will be the one to end your pitiful, pitiful life, human." Its voice sounded hollow and eerie before it suddenly changed the side of its head again, and a different face appears. "Kekek tilde, it won't be long before I snap you into 2 wretched human," it calls out, but the voice this time sounded wicked and annoying as it cackled at the feared expression of the slayer. It changed the side of its head again, and a different expression was on it this time. "Don't go tilde little tilde human tilde." Its voice sounded deep and darkly hollow in tone, as its hand briskly made hand gestures, and all of a sudden, a huge wall appeared in front of the fleeing slayer, making him hit it and fall to the ground, the boy at the mercy of this terrifying demon. "Time of retribution human," the hollowed voice said this time, as its lower third arm bulges out a long black blade and aims at the skies, readying to strike down the boy. "Bye-bye," the wicked voice taunts this time. The boy shivered in fear instead, crying as he waited for his demise. It never came as the sound of blades clashing was heard, and when the boy looked up, a boy with black hair with a baby blue-colored haori, patterns of waters and clouds adorned in its design. "Are you all right?" the boy hastily asks, looking at him slightly, protecting the boy from the multi-faced demon. His sword faced the demon, half of his attention on him and his opponent. Well, another slayer has appeared. Quite amusing this is, kekek." The wicked voice cackles in response to the black-haired boy's appearance. Hanagaki faces the demon this time, some attention to him, whilst still protecting the downed slayer. "You need to get out of here," he calls out to the boy behind him, who hasn't even moved an inch, frozen in fear for his life and his coward self. "Poor tilde him tilde," the deep and hollowed voice expresses this time, "coward tilde weak tilde useless tilde little tilde slayer tilde." It mocks at the shivering and now crying boy. It irks a bit of anger in Hanagaki as he lunges himself at the demon, who immediately back away, forming a hand gesture again, and all of a sudden, creating incoming spikes towards him. Hikari no Kakyu. Shichai no Kata Starfall, Angel's Wrath. A bright light formed again, blinding all 3 expressions, and Hanagaki aimed at the center tip of the incoming ground spike and broke it upon impact, shattering it into millions of pieces. "Impossible tilde," the hollowed deep voice, cries out in surprise, its face shifting to the first, and it hovers away again from incoming slashes Hanagaki aimed at them. The demon was getting hasty and quickly decided to aim for the fallen demon slayer for nourishment. It hovered quickly in his direction when it was suddenly stopped again by Hanagaki as it aims its neck from behind. It ducks quickly as it halts slightly away from the cowering demon slayer to avoid the strike. Hanagaki lands in front of the boy again, protecting him from the demon's clutches. Not a chance, Demon Hanagaki threatens as he pointed his sword threateningly at the demon. It shivers in response at the glowing glare of the Slayer's bright blue eyes. "Why?" the cowering boy asks in a stuttering and shivering tone. Hanagaki turns his attention back at the boy, but his stance is still aimed at the demon in front of them. "Why save me?" he pathetically cries in the question of Hanagaki's actions. "I'm just a weak and pathetic demon slayer. I can't even slay a demon here. So what good will you do if you save me, huh?" he stutters in question. Hanagaki doesn't respond and simply listens and guards him with a solemn expression. "It's better if you just leave me here to die." "Stop. I'm too pathetic. It won't do you any good saving me." "Stop that. I won't survive here anyway. It won't do you any good as I'll forever be just a burden to anyone out there." "I said stop that. Just leave me to die." "I said stop that," Hanagaki yells out in anger. The boy flinched at the tone of voice, and so did the demon, shivering at the hardened and shadowed expression the black-haired boy is adorning. "So what if you didn't manage to kill a demon here? Do kill one once you're out there," Hanagaki mumbles deeply and wholeheartedly. "So what if you don't do well here? Then you could just do better next time out there as Slayer," he adds in, his stance changing as he goes. "No matter how much you feel pathetic, no matter how much you feel like you don't have the right to be a demon slayer, no matter how much you feel like you don't deserve to live, you have to keep moving on." Hanagaki's stance turns fierce and threatening. The aura around him quivers the demon in fright. The boy had suddenly changed. "You fail here, you redeem yourself. Don't die here, not here nor not tonight." He lifts his sword a bit upward. "If you really want to die," he lifts his head. "Then die in honor of being a demon slayer you wish to be," he yells out, his stance with the sword in the air ready, a determined expression on his face. His expression hardens further, his eyes glimmer even brighter. "Cause no matter what, your life and those lives you will save will be the most precious thing you'll ever experience. So don't go wasting your life here. Go out there and save as many lives as you can. Where you fail here, will compensate for the people you save out there." He turns to the boy with a renewed expression on both of them. The boy looked at Hanagaki like he was a savior in his eyes, and Hanagaki adorning a new and vigorous expression. "I saved you because your life is important, because I know if you failed here, you can do so much better out there," he tells him softly before returning his attention to the demon. "Your life is important as it creates the future of those who follow it. You will fail to see tomorrow again if you die here now pathetically, without even doing something wonderful in your life." The boy felt the heavy feeling lifted from his chest and disappear at the words this boy spoke, claiming that he mattered in living, that his failures won't define him here, but what he will do out there. "So go, leave," Hanagaki finally yells back as he swiftly aims for the demon again. And the boy, looking back at the black-haired guy, he can't bear to watch him die here too, so instead, he waits behind one of the trees until he defeats that head demon. While Hanagaki suddenly felt renewed. He finally found it again. His reason, his purpose. "I wanted to save, be everyone's hero, someone they can look up to and be their light, someone they can see as the source of hope and be there to bring them a much brighter future." And with that, Hanagaki's battle against the head demon lasted for a while, leaving him battered and bruised as the result of it. Meanwhile, Tanjiro manages to complete his 7 days within the final selection. His forehead was bleeding on the side, and he was covered in soot and dirt when he fought that hand demon. The very demon he learned throughout the fight had killed both Sabito and Makomo. He was surprised when he found out the two were already dead, but, thanks to them, he was able to avenge the 2 in 1, hoping the 2 can finally rest now, alongside the other children who came before them. He did feel pity for the demon towards the end. He sounded so earnestly sad, like a lost child, looking for a way out. He hopes the hand demon reborn as a human again, no longer a demon in his next life. But what disappoints him the most is that he never got an answer on how to turn a demon back into a human again. He felt rather disappointed and frustrated at himself. Not a single demon conversed with him about a cure. He reaches a grove of wisteria flowers again, indicating he finally made it. He treks forward to where the rest should be, and to his surprise, everyone was here. Well, some were. There are at least 21 of them within the area. He looks around the place to find Hanagaki, only to not find him there. Did he not make it? An awful gut feeling pooled in his stomach. He felt worried for his friend, and he worked so hard on honing his breathing technique, too, if he didn't make it. Do you think he's all right? A random boy spoke out softly. Tanjiro turns towards two boys whispering to each other. Their scents were of worry and guilt. Guilt? Of course, he will. That breathing technique of his was amazing. It's impossible for him to lose that easily. The other boy exclaimed, nervousness laced in his tone. But what if he didn't? The other guys asked, as he nibbles on his thumbs and looks at the entranceway again, anxiety and guilt vivid on his expression. I can never live on with the guilt that we left that poor black-haired boy on his own, he expresses sadly. Black-haired boy? Did he mean? Tanjiro went towards the whispering duo to ask him further about the boy they spoke of. Excuse me, Tanjiro calls out quietly. The two turn their attention towards him. They were about to retaliate to leave them alone when they notice his Haori was the same as the black-haired boy who saved them. The black-haired boy you two speak of, did he have ocean blue eyes by any chance? Tanjiro asks. The mention of a black-haired boy was heard by the others who were saved by him, who focused their attention on the burgundy-haired boy, who adorned the same mask as their savior. Why, yes, he was. He looks down at Tanjiro's attire. He wore the mask as you, too. Do you two know each other? The boy who was looking outside asks in worry. Yeah, we trained under the same master. Did something happen to Takemichi? He further asks. The two boys only glance at each other, unsure of what to say, if to tell if he was probably dead somewhere or apologies instead of the burgundy boy's lost friend. We don't know what happened, another boy chirps in. The three boys glance towards the source. He was adorning the same worried look, as well guilt, gratefulness, and worry emanating from his scent. If you're his friend, then allow me to thank you instead. He bows down to Tanjiro, which shocks the two, and Tanjiro was now getting flustered at the gesture. Please don't bow. I am not deserving of whatever Takemichi did to make you bow down to me like this, Tanjiro stutters in reply. The boy remained bowing, but he shook his head in response whilst still in his position. If there is a chance he did not survive, I want to at least thank someone close to him, he adds in, his voice getting shaky. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have lived to see another day. So, at the very least, let me thank you as his stead. He ends with a very guilty tone, sounding so apologetic. Tanjiro was about to ask him to lift himself when the other two also began bowing, too. We also want to thank you instead. If it wasn't for him, the two of us too would have died there. So we're eternally grateful for your friend, the boy who asked about Takemichi's well-being replies. Tanjiro doesn't know what to do. When Tanjiro the rest of the story about how Hanagaki went around to save everyone from any demon the demon slayers were having a struggle fighting against, he felt proud of his friend that he was so valiant, but also guilty since he's not Takemichi, the savior of this people. Please raise your heads, he orders them softly and sincerely. You shouldn't bow to me, Tanjiro replies softly and happily at the gesture these people were showing for his friend. I'm sure Takemichi will survive, so save this gratitude for him. And whatever guilt you are feeling for surviving instead of him, please erase that. He asks them with sincerity in his eyes that the others were blinking at the kindness this man exudes. I'm sure he wouldn't want you to feel ashamed and guilty of what he knew was right. Live up to expectations instead. That's the best gratitude you could do for what he did. The people who witnessed the kindness this boy exudes remind them of the black-haired boy who saved them. Something about him and the raven head was warmly similar. Both radiate so much kindness, light, and warmth in their words. It was about to reach full morning where the examination will end when all of a sudden, a loud cry for help was heard. Somebody, get some medic here quickly. The people within the area all focused their attention on the entranceway, only for a few to gasp in surprise at the sight of a beaten, bloody black-haired boy. Takemichi, Tanjiro calls out, as he rushed towards his friend, aiding the other demon slayer who was carrying him with one arm hanging on his neck, while Tanjiro took the other. The boys who were conversing together felt relieved at the sight of him. The one who bowed first immediately went to find someone to help the raven head. Takemichi, are you all right? Tanjiro asks, as he tries to get a response from Hanagaki, who groans in response and looks up slightly at Tanjiro, who smiled at the sight of his friend surviving. Tanjiro, I did it. He spoke in a hoarse and soft tone. I save everyone. No one died tonight. He moved towards Tanjiro and hugged him as slouched his weight at him and hugged him weakly. I'm glad you're alive, he slowly said as he passes out due to exhaustion. Medical assistants arrived shortly to aid Hanagaki with his injuries and was now resting. You did great, Takemichi. You can rest for now. Somewhere in faraway parts of the forest, at an estate within a small village, a man with purpled skin was quietly listening to what his crow had reported at what happened. He smiles softly at the news. Is that so? He began stroking the head of the crow who delivered the news. As many as 20 of them survived. Wonderful, he compliments softly as he looks above the pale blue and clear blue sky. The number of my children has increased again. He pauses, chuckling for a moment. And it seems we have some rather extraordinary children within them, too. It was dark. Wherever he looked, it was pitch-black darkness that surrounds him, and he seems to be floating, with no sure footing to place, nor a wall or light to be seen. He was only wearing the same clothes he had when he fainted at the entranceway at the end of the final selection. He immediately squirms, flails and struggles. Despite nothing holding him down, he became rather alert that he was just flying, or floating, in midair, in this total darkness. Was he dreaming? He thought so himself at first when all of a sudden, a voice echoed throughout the entire area. Be the light. Hanagaki snapped his head towards the booming and reverberating sound. It sounded deep and hollow, but not to the point it was intimidating nor threatening, just overwhelming. Who's there? Hanagaki asks. He kept turning around from all sides to try to locate the voice, but nothing can be seen in this dark and cold void. Be their guide. He hears it again, calling out to him. Hanagaki panics slightly at this, since he can't see them. He can't assess if they are a threat or not, so it scares him a little. But he tries not to make it obvious unless the person talking to him is a threat. What do you mean be their guide? He asks aloud, trying to still locate the origin of the voice. When he tried to, a bright light shone from above him, and it was getting brighter each second, blinding him bit by bit. He was about to look away from the blinding light when he turns his attention to his left. He spots several people, gathered together looking at him. They all held a demon slayer scabbard in their hands, indicating they were demon slayers. The light shone brighter that he couldn't identify their faces, but before the light completely blinded him, he saw one of the people's mouths something he couldn't comprehend. Help him. The next thing he knew, his eyes were slowly adjusting to the bright light outside, where he was currently lying down. Outside, the sun was about to set with its orange on the horizon, and it was about to turn into night. He shifts slightly to look around where he was, and to his observation, he sees himself covered in bandages. His head had some wrapped around, and a few on his body as well. Outside was an open yard with a lovely decorated garden with the sunset adding to the aesthetics. Oh, Takemichi, you're awake! A familiar voice calls out. Hanagaki turns his head at the sliding shoji doors, revealing a wrapped in the head Tanjiro, who's balancing himself with a crutch in hand. His sword was placed beside him, looking battered and dirty from his time at the final selection. Tanjiro, you're alive! Hanagaki tried to stand, but he seems to be in extreme pain when he tried to stand too quickly. Tanjiro immediately went to Hanagaki to prevent him from moving too much. You don't have to get up. You're still injured, so rest a little. Tanjiro tries to reassure Hanagaki while helping him readjust himself into a proper sitting position so the two could talk about their experience. It was one hectic story after the other. Tanjiro spoke of his encounter with a large, green, and disgusting hand demon. He told him of the fact that the demon was the same demon who killed Sabito and Makomo, shocking Tanjiro apparently when he learned the truth. Hanagaki pretended to be in shock as well. He said he had defeated him, relieving the two. Finally, those two, as well as the other children, can finally rest now. Hanagaki was next to tell his side of the story, as he narrates enthusiastically as he went around the whole mountain, trying to slay as many demons as he can, as well as save as many demon slayers he could. Tanjiro felt immensely proud and grateful for his friend. He also explains he went around trying to use at least some of his breathing techniques. He admits he's got a long way before he could perfect it completely. They were both told that if they can both move now, they were free to leave and go back home and wait for their Nichiren blades to be forged back home. Hanagaki wasn't able to pick one during the closing ceremony, so Tanjiro took the mantle and chose one for him and himself, as well as received his and Tanjiro's first Kasugai crows and their ready-made uniforms. Both carried their uniforms on a sling bag. The two began to depart for home. They still talked together as they walked back, exhaustion and fatigue still present. Hanagaki also heard Tanjiro whisper a soft apology in advance to his still comatose sister about not being able to ask how to turn a demon back into a human. It hurt him to see this helpless, so self-sacrificing just for his only surviving family member and little sister. He sees a little bit of himself in him and felt pity. At one point, one of them would suddenly collapse to the ground due to fatigue and still recovering from injuries, but both were determined to return. Therefore, they continued to march home. It was already nighttime when they arrived. The house was already lit and one could see a warm-colored orange hue inside, indicating Urokodaki-san must have been making dinner to eat. Glee was evident on their faces for food to eat again. Urokodaki-san, Nezuko, we're home. Tanjiro exhales heavily in response, leaning against the crutch to support himself up. All of a sudden, the front door of the house was suddenly kicked open. The two young boys' eyes bulged at the sight of who it was. The demon girl, Tanjiro's little sister, had begun walking out of the house, all alive and well, exiting rather calmly with the bamboo in her mouth as a safeguard. Her long dark brown skirt flowed as she moves, and her dark hair with orange-tipped hair flowed behind her back, looking adorable with her penguin walk. "Hey, Nezuko," Tanjiro calls out. You're finally awake?" Tanjiro asks aloud, happily, and almost sounded like he was about to cry. Nezuko had her attention solely on her brother as she raced toward him. Tanjiro had left Hanagaki's side to reach for his sister enthusiastically. Hanagaki only followed slowly behind, happy for his sister to finally wake up from her 2 years of comatose. "Nezuko," he calls out in a hurry that he trips on his footing, landing on the ground with a harsh scrunch from the dirt. He immediately gets up, grunting in pain at the fall, only to be hugged by his sister, wrapping her arms around his head. Once she did, Tanjiro immediately began crying, hugging his sister ever so tightly in response, holding her for dear life, as if she was going to disappear any minute soon. Why'd you fall asleep all of a sudden?" he cries out in question, never waking up at least once. He slightly scolds his little sister in worry, tears already streaming down his face that it affected Hanagaki to cry, too. If the two had paid attention, they would have realized that Urokodaki-san had just come back from gathering firewood for the night, held tightly at his right hand. "I was worried you were going to die, you know?" he yells back loudly this time, worry and fright evident in his shout. Urokodaki had begun walking towards them, dropping the firewood and foregoing it as he reached out to the two crying siblings to hug them both. "You two came back to us alive," Urokodaki-san claims, and if the two had paid attention, they would have seen Urokodaki crying behind the mask. Hanagaki at one point had begun crying as well. Urokodaki reaches out a hand from Hanagaki, to which he accepts and was pulled into the hug as well, patting him from the back. "Welcome back, you two." "I see, so you killed that morphed demon." Urokodaki repeats what Tanjiro did. The two sat in front of Urokodaki, side by side, as the three conversed for a moment of their time at the final selection. The food is cooking in the middle of the fire. At last, Urokodaki claims softly, relieved that the demon is finally gone. He looks back at the two. Seeing them bruised pains him, but seeing them together and alive is what makes him truly happy that they're alive and well, despite the sustained amount of injuries evident from their bandages. "I'm truly impressed you two made it back," he claims at the two. The two respond with a nod and a yes in response. There are several kinds of demons. The demons who use a special spell called Blood Demon Art possess supernatural abilities. Urokodaki explains. You two may have to fight those demons as well from now on, and battling them will be proven more difficult than anything you two would have known until now. It tenses the two at the statement. Sensing the tension between the two, he continues. "But even so, Tanjiro, Hanagaki, I'm sure you two will be just fine." It relieves them to hear that confidence from their master and teacher. Urokodaki then turns his attention to Hanagaki this time. "As for you, Hanagaki, I am rather impressed at what you did at the final selection." Urokodaki compliments him, resulting in him blushing furiously. "Thank you, it was no big deal." he stutters in response, scratching his right cheek at the given compliment, earning him a small chuckle from Tanjiro. Oh, but it is. The only time I heard someone do the same deed as you was none other than my former deceased student, Sabito, he tells them rather smugly if one were to pay attention to his gruff voice. The two immediately whipped their heads at the sudden information. Sabito saved everyone in the final selection, too? The same thought came into the two boys' minds at the sudden information. Indeed, so I'm rather proud that you were able to do the same thing as he did. For avenging his and Makomo's death, as well as following his footsteps, that's one great feat you two have accomplished, and I am proud to have been your teacher, he boldly claims, resulting in the two getting flustered rather quickly. Urokodaki chuckles at their adorable reactions. Tanjiro spoke first this time. I think that Nezuko's not like the other demons. Do you think it could be that whatchamacallit art? He questions. Hanagaki brightens at the theory, rather convinced it could be the reason why Nezuko is so strangely different from other demons. No, I don't think so. Urokodaki immediately shuts down the theory. I wouldn't call that a sample of blood demon art. But I am only guessing here, but it could be Nezuko is recovering her strength by sleeping instead of consuming human flesh, he explains. The two brighten at the thought. This relieves Tanjiro, so at the very least, he doesn't have to worry too much on Nezuko about eating any humans since she won't need human flesh to recover. While Hanagaki felt relieved that Nezuko won't need to eat human flesh, he can't comprehend what will happen if she does consume human flesh. That's a relief. Hanagaki was the one who voices what was in Tanjiro's mind, which was followed by him a hum of approval. It only took a couple of seconds to pass before Urokodaki changed his mood and his atmosphere, and Tanjiro and Hanagaki sensed this rather quickly. Now then, let's talk seriously this time. Urokodaki deepens his voice. The two pay back attention and slightly tensed at this, back straight, and ready for whatever Urokodaki was about to convey. He turns his attention back to Hanagaki and Hanagaki gulps nervously at this. Hanagaki, he calls out. Yes? Do you remember your promise to me? He pauses. About that reason you wanted to become a demon slayer and all behind it, he asks. Tanjiro, being as he wasn't here to know about it, was confused and only looked back at Takemichi at what was Urokodaki referring to. Hanagaki bulged his eyes in surprise. Of course, he did remember. He promised Urokodaki-san to tell him everything about why he wanted to be a demon slayer and find his purpose again once he did become one, and he did. He became a demon slayer and has now remembered his reason and purpose again, so it was only natural he was to comply with his promise and his end of the deal. Yes, I do, he pauses, scratching the back of his palm as he took a deep breath. Whatever I am about to tell you, whatever it is, I want you to both know that it is all true. Whatever my past was, whatever purpose I tried to seek when I wanted to be a demon slayer, whatever preposterous story I may reveal, it is all true. And you will have to believe me, okay? And none of this leaks out to anyone, he asks for reassurance. Urokodaki only hums deeply. Tanjiro also nods in response. Hanagaki took a deep breath again. You see? After a good long hour or two of explaining, the explanation and story had ended, leaving the two listeners rather perplexed and shocked at the most bizarre and unbelievable story they have been ever told of. Why, you're from the future? Tanjiro asks in a stutter, rather shocked at the information. Why, yeah, sorry for not telling you any sooner, Tanjiro, he sheepishly responds with a small laugh, scratching the back of his head. Tanjiro still couldn't get out of his shocked state, but he tries to take it all in slowly. As for Urokodaki, he felt immensely overwhelmed at this. He expected a lot of other reasons why, or what about Hanagaki, but never once did he expect time travel to be one of the reasons. So, if I get this correctly, you're from the future, Urokodaki points out as Hanagaki nods. Your mind is originally in the age of 26, who died in the future and somehow time traveled back 12 years into the past where you were in middle school and had begun trying to change a terrible future by experiencing death, trauma and such just to try and save your friends from death or terrible fates they experience in that said future, he said all in one sitting, which impresses Hanagaki. But it shouldn't really with breathing techniques. Yes, he bluntly answers. And you've seen their future more than a dozen times in the future, and died a few times too? Urokodaki also adds deadpanned in his question. Yes, he answers in a questioning tone. unsure of Urokodaki-san and Tanjiro's complete reaction to this. Urokodaki-san only sighs in response, scrubbing the back of his neck at the sudden tension before looking back at Hanagaki with another sigh. "I believe you, Hanagaki," he claims. Hanagaki blinks slowly at this. He expected that they wouldn't believe him, but if demons exist in this mortal plane, it's without a doubt a chance that there will be something like humans possessing supernatural abilities to not exist. "So, I believe you," he says so calmly. Hanagaki sighs in relief at this and turns his attention towards Tanjiro, who also nods in response. "I believe you, too. You don't smell like you're lying, so I believe that you're telling the truth, Takemichi," he adds in too with a gentle, sunshine smile. Hanagaki only smiles back the same sunshine smile back at Tanjiro, too, in response. "Then that explains why you went around the whole mountain then?" Urokodaki asks. The two immediately turn their attention back to Urokodaki. "The reason you went all around the mountain that night instead of surviving on your own, and saving everyone on that mountain, was because those youngsters were about to die that night, weren't they?" he asks. Hanagaki only nods small in response. Tanjiro's expression changes into awe at that statement. "Yes, I couldn't let them just die there. Call it a selfish ego boost, but if they wanted to die, I wanted them at least die whilst being a demon slayer, just like they wish to be," he explains softly. The two listeners softened at the claim, thinking together that Hanagaki was too kind for this world. Urokodaki pats his head instead. "And you did well. I am glad you managed to save them." And with that, their night ended with nearly not eating any of the dinner cooked, and rapidly hurried to eat before turning to bed. Hanagaki felt rather relieved now that he no longer has to hide his secret from his most trusted friend and teacher. He knows they can keep a secret, so he told them. It was a peaceful and long night. Everyone had gone to bed and slept, and only excitedly waited for their swords to be delivered and brought to them soon.